Maya Jackson's alarm blared through the stillness of the morning, its shrill sound cutting through the quiet air. She reached out with practiced hands, silencing it with a single tap before sitting up in her bed. The sunlight filtered softly through the curtains, casting a warm glow over the neat yet lived-in room. Pictures of family, awards from her academic achievements, and a few military mementos from her father's decorated career hung on the walls. Maya stretched her arms above her head, still half dazed from sleep, but a sudden notification on her phone caught her attention. It was a voice message from her dad, Colonel Daniel Jackson. A smile tugged at her lips as she tapped the screen, hearing his deep, reassuring voice fill the space around her. "Morning, sunshine. Different time zone here. Can't sleep, so I thought I'd check in. Your debate today, right? Remember what I taught you. Stay calm, speak clearly, and never let them see you sweat. I'm sorry I can't be there, but this mission, well, you know how it goes. Make me proud, kiddo. Love you." Maya smiled softly, a touch of sadness in her eyes. Her father's deployments were nothing new to her, but this one felt different. No location shared, no timeline given, just the words classified and important. She had learned long ago not to ask questions, and she certainly didn't plan on starting now. "Love you too, Dad," she whispered to the empty room, the quietness of the moment settling around her like a blanket. She set the phone down and pushed herself out of bed, her morning routine a reflection of the military precision that ran in her blood, something she didn't realize she had inherited from her father. Shower, dress, breakfast. She picked out a simple blue blouse and jeans, professional enough for the debate, but not trying too hard. In the kitchen, her mother, Lisa Jackson, was already up. A nurse at the local hospital, Lisa's schedule was just as demanding as Daniel's, and her face always carried a look of careful concentration as she sipped her coffee and went over patient files. "Big day?" Lisa asked, glancing up from her papers. Maya nodded, pouring herself a glass of orange juice. "Dad sent a message. He's okay." Lisa's expression softened, her concern clear. "That's good. He'll be home before you know it." Maya nodded, though part of her didn't share the same sense of reassurance. They both knew it could be weeks, maybe months, before Daniel returned. "I can walk to school. It's not far, and I want to clear my head before the debate." Lisa nodded, glancing at her watch. "I've got an early shift. Don't let me keep you. Be safe." As Maya stepped out of the house, the crisp September air felt refreshing against her skin. She took a deep breath, savoring the few moments of peace before the day's events took center stage. The walk to Jefferson High was quiet, almost peaceful, and she used the time to mentally review her arguments. The topic for today's debate was something she was passionate about: modern civil rights, a subject close to her heart after years of experiencing prejudice in their predominantly white suburban town. But just as she neared the school, the tranquility of the morning began to shift. Standing near the entrance, surrounded by a group of his friends, was Ethan Thompson, tall and blond with a smug grin plastered on his face. Maya knew him well, having crossed paths with him far too many times before. As always, he was the center of attention, his voice carrying across the courtyard as he boasted loudly, "I'm telling you, my uncle basically runs this town. My dad says he's got more pull than the mayor himself. Last week, he pulled over some guy from the east side, and when the dude tried to complain, Uncle Todd just laughed and gave him another ticket." The group laughed, nodding enthusiastically, but Maya felt her jaw tighten at the mention of his uncle, Officer Todd Thompson. Ethan's words made it clear that his uncle's reputation wasn't just that of a lawman, it was one of fear and intimidation. Maya tried to walk past unnoticed, her mind focused on the debate ahead, but Ethan's voice rang out one more time. "Last week, Uncle Todd handled some guy who thought he could get away with running his mouth. He pulled him over, wrote him up, and when the guy tried to fight it, Todd just laughed and gave him another ticket. My dad says my uncle's untouchable." Maya's stomach churned. Todd Thompson wasn't just another cop in town. He was a bully who used his badge to intimidate and control. Maya quickened her pace, determined to ignore him and focus on the task ahead. But she couldn't shake the feeling that today might change everything. The morning passed quickly, and by the time the bell rang for the afternoon debate, Maya found herself in the classroom, laying out her notes methodically at her desk. Her heart was pounding with anticipation, but her mind was focused. She had prepared for this moment for weeks, refining her arguments and gathering evidence to back up her points. She was ready. Mrs. Peterson, their teacher, was busy setting up at the front of the room as students filtered in. Maya's eyes swept the room and landed on Ethan, who sauntered in with a confident smile, clearly ready to make his case. He was always the center of attention, and today was no different. His entourage followed behind him, chuckling as they took their seats. Today's debate topic, Mrs. Peterson announced, is the current state of police reform in America. Team 1 will argue for increased oversight, while Team 2 will argue against it. Maya's team was first to present. She stood up, feeling the eyes of her classmates on her as she approached the podium. The nervousness that had briefly flickered in her chest melted away, replaced by the steady confidence that her father had always encouraged in her. She began her opening statement, citing statistics and referencing recent cases that illustrated the need for more oversight and accountability in law enforcement. As she spoke, her voice grew stronger, and when she finished, the room was silent for a brief moment before polite applause followed. Maya took a deep breath, relieved that the first part of the debate had gone well, but she knew Ethan would retaliate with everything he had. Ethan's rebuttal started strong, his voice rising as he spoke passionately about the importance of law enforcement in keeping order. But as his words grew louder, they started to veer off topic, becoming more personal and inflammatory. "The police are the thin blue line protecting us from chaos," he declared, his voice filled with self-righteousness. Maybe if certain communities showed more respect for authority, there wouldn't be problems in the first place. A murmur rippled through the classroom, and Maya could see several students exchanging uncomfortable glances. Mrs. Peterson frowned but didn't intervene, allowing Ethan to continue. Maya's turn came again. She stood tall, her voice steady but firm. "The issue isn't about respect," she said, her words clear and deliberate. "It's about systems of power and who they protect. When your uncle brags about writing extra tickets for East Side residents, that's not law enforcement. That's harassment." The room fell silent. Ethan's face flushed with anger, his jaw clenching as he glared at Maya. She refused to back down, her gaze unwavering. "My team has shown that reform benefits everyone, including good police officers who want to serve with honor," she continued, her tone unyielding. "Your argument isn't just flawed, Ethan. It's dangerous." When the debate finally ended, Mrs. Peterson awarded Maya's team the victory. She praised their research, composure, and the strength of their arguments. The students filed out of the room, but Maya could feel Ethan's glare burning into her back as she packed up her things. She didn't let it bother her. She had won the debate, and that was what mattered. But as she walked to her locker, she couldn't shake the uneasy feeling that had settled deep in her gut. Something about the way Ethan was acting, angry and vindictive, told her that this wasn't over. Just as she closed her locker, Ethan appeared at her side, his friends conspicuously absent. His expression was cold, his voice low but filled with venom. "You had no right bringing my uncle into this," he hissed, his face inches from hers. "You made me look like an idiot." Maya remained calm, standing her ground. She met his gaze and replied, "You did that yourself." Ethan's hand shot out, grabbing her wrist in a tight, vice-like grip. "Don't walk away from me," he warned, his voice seething with anger. Instinct kicked in. Years of self-defense training, taught by her father since she was a little girl, took over. In one fluid motion, Maya twisted her body, using Ethan's momentum against him. Before either of them fully realized what had happened, Ethan was on his back, staring up at the ceiling in shock. The wind knocked out of him. A small crowd had gathered, wide-eyed and whispering, as Maya stood frozen, realizing what she had just done. "You're crazy," Ethan sputtered, scrambling to his feet. His voice was a mix of humiliation and fury. "You can't just do that!" Maya didn't reply. She couldn't. A teacher was already approaching, drawn by the noise and commotion. Without looking back at Ethan, Maya walked away quickly, her heart pounding in her chest. She had never used her father's self-defense moves on anyone before, but in that moment it had felt necessary, and now she couldn't shake the feeling that this confrontation would have consequences she wasn't ready for. Ethan watched her go, his humiliation turning to something darker, cold hatred. The next morning, Maya walked into Jefferson High with her head held high, despite the overwhelming feeling of eyes on her. The events from yesterday still hung in the air like a thick fog, the whispers and sideways glances a constant reminder that things had changed, at least for her. As she made her way through the hallway, she spotted Ethan Thompson by the lockers, his face red and contorted with rage. His usual group of friends was conspicuously absent, and there was a certain emptiness about him now, as though the world he'd once felt so comfortable in had come crashing down. He saw her, and for a brief moment, their eyes locked. Maya didn't look away. Ethan's scowl deepened, but he didn't approach her. Instead, he turned his back and walked away, shoulders stiff, the echo of his footsteps reverberating through the hallway. Maya couldn't help but feel a flicker of satisfaction at the sight. She wasn't scared of him anymore, but a deeper part of her knew that the situation wasn't over. In fact, it was just beginning. As she walked to her first class, her thoughts kept drifting back to Ethan's confrontation. He'd always been the school's golden boy, the one who could do no wrong, and now she had humiliated him. He wouldn't let that go. Maya was sure of it. The school days seemed to drag on, each passing hour feeling longer than the last. When lunch finally came, she made her way to the cafeteria with Zoe, her best friend. Zoe had been a rock for Maya throughout the whole ordeal, the one person who hadn't turned her back when things got difficult. "Are you okay?" Zoe asked, her voice low, as they found a quiet corner in the cafeteria to sit. Maya shrugged, trying to force a smile. "I'm fine. Just trying to get through today." Zoe nodded, her eyes scanning the cafeteria, as though checking for any potential threats. "You're handling this better than I thought you would. Honestly, I'm kind of scared for you." Maya looked at her friend, surprised. "What do you mean?" Zoe hesitated for a moment before speaking. "I heard some stuff. People are saying your family has a history and that you might have uh, a record. Like you've been kicked out of other schools before or something?" Maya froze. "That's a lie," she replied, her voice tight. "I've never been kicked out of any school. This is just their way of trying to make me look bad." Zoe's eyes widened, the weight of the rumors settling in. "I know it's not true, Maya, but people believe it, and they're believing whatever Ethan's saying too." Maya's stomach churned. The thought of Ethan spreading lies about her was infuriating. But what really scared her was the realization that Todd Thompson, Ethan's uncle, had far more power than she had anticipated. Maya had always known that the Thompsons were influential in town, but she didn't fully understand just how deep their influence went. Now it was becoming clear. This wasn't just a schoolyard rivalry anymore. This was a battle for control, and Maya was caught right in the middle. "I don't care what they say," Maya said, her voice steady. "I'm not backing down. Not now." Zoe met her gaze, her eyes filled with both admiration and concern. "Just be careful. You know how dangerous these people can be." Maya nodded, but inside, the knot of anxiety only tightened. She had no idea just how dangerous things were about to get. The rest of the day passed in a haze, and Maya's mind was elsewhere, constantly returning to the confrontation in the hallway with Ethan. But when the final bell rang, signaling the end of the school day, she was ready to leave. She grabbed her things quickly and made her way out of the building, not wanting to linger. As she stepped outside, the crisp autumn air hit her, but it did little to clear her head. Maya walked briskly down the sidewalk, not looking back, trying to push out the thoughts that had been clouding her mind all day. Her phone buzzed in her pocket, and she pulled it out to see a text from her mom. "Be home soon. You okay?" Maya smiled slightly and typed back, "Yeah, just ready to get home." She slipped the phone back into her pocket and quickened her pace, eager to get to the safety of home. But as she rounded the corner onto Oakwood Street, she was stopped in her tracks. A police cruiser was slowly creeping toward her, its headlights off, the sound of the engine almost silent against the quiet of the neighborhood. Maya froze, her heart pounding in her chest as she recognized the vehicle. She didn't need to see the driver to know who it was, Officer Todd Thompson. She had never felt the weight of her own fear so clearly before. The cruiser came to a stop right beside her, and Maya reluctantly looked over at the driver. Todd's cold eyes met hers from behind the wheel, and a thin, taunting smile spread across his face. "Maya Jackson," he said in a voice that was anything but friendly. "We need to talk about what happened at school today." Maya's throat tightened, but she managed to speak, her voice steady despite the fear creeping in. "I was defending myself," she said firmly. "Ethan grabbed me first." Todd didn't flinch. "That's not what we heard," he said smoothly, stepping out of the car. "Sounds like you assaulted the kid for no reason." "That's not true," Maya protested, trying to maintain her composure. "Oh, I think it is," Todd said, his tone shifting to something darker. "You see, Maya, there are rules around here, and your daddy isn't here to protect you." Maya took a step back, her mind racing. She knew where this was going. She had seen it too many times before. Police using their power to intimidate and silence people they didn't like. But this time, it was different. She wasn't going to let him scare her. Not this time. "I won't apologize for defending myself," Maya said, her voice steady and cold. Todd's eyes narrowed, and for a moment there was silence between them. Then with a sharp movement, he grabbed her arm and shoved her against the side of the cruiser. The cold metal of the car pressed into her cheek, and her breath caught in her throat. "I think you need a lesson in respect," Todd whispered, his face dangerously close to hers. "This town has rules, Maya. My rules, and you're about to learn them the hard way." Maya stood there, heart hammering in her chest, but her mind was clear. She wasn't going to break. Not this time. The moment seemed to stretch on forever, but finally Todd released her with a shove, turning back to the car. "We'll be watching you, Maya. For your own safety, of course." As he climbed into the cruiser and drove off, Maya stood there shaking with anger and fear. Her breath came in a sharp gasp, but she didn't cry. Not yet. Not when she knew that this was only the beginning. Maya stood frozen in the street, watching the police cruiser disappear around the corner. Her heart was still racing, and her mind was reeling from the encounter. It felt as though the world had shifted in that brief moment. Like Todd had made it clear that she wasn't just dealing with a single corrupt cop, but with a whole system that was out to get her. She couldn't shake the cold dread creeping up her spine. After a few moments, Maya forced herself to move, pushing herself to walk the rest of the way home. Every step felt heavy, like the weight of the world was on her shoulders. The cool air did little to calm the fire building in her chest. She had always known that her family was different, that her father's career in the military set them apart. But now, standing in the middle of a neighborhood that had always felt safe, she realized just how dangerous it could be to stand out, especially when you were the target. By the time Maya arrived home, the sense of foreboding had settled deep in her bones. Her mom's car was already in the driveway, and the sight of it should have brought comfort, but instead it made her feel more isolated. Lisa Jackson, her mom, had always been a strong presence in her life, but in that moment, Maya couldn't help but wish her dad was home. Her father was the one who could handle things. He was the one who had taught her how to stand tall in the face of danger, how to protect herself. Inside, the house smelled like fresh coffee and the faint scent of something simmering on the stove. Lisa was in the kitchen, scanning through some papers. Her mother's face softened as Maya entered, but there was a flicker of concern behind her eyes. "Rough day?" Lisa asked gently, setting the papers down and turning to face her daughter. Maya nodded, trying to mask the turmoil inside. "Just tired, I guess." Lisa studied her for a moment, as if deciding whether to press further. She didn't. "You want to talk about it?" Maya shook her head, not ready to relive the encounter with Todd just yet. "It's fine, really." But Lisa wasn't convinced. "Maya, you know your father and I are always here for you, right?" Maya glanced over at her mom, her chest tightening. She was so tired of hiding everything from her. But the truth was, Maya didn't want to burden her mother any more than she already had. Lisa had enough to deal with at work, where she worked long shifts as a nurse, and Maya didn't want to add to her stress. "I know," Maya said quietly, offering a smile that didn't quite reach her eyes. Lisa gave her a long look, but she didn't push. Instead, she returned to the stove, stirring a pot of something that Maya couldn't quite place. The familiar motions of everyday life, the sounds, the smells, should have been comforting, but today they only served to highlight how out of place Maya felt. Her phone buzzed in her pocket, and she pulled it out, hoping for a distraction. It was a message from Zoe. "Hey, you good?" Heard about the run-in with Todd? Maya's fingers hesitated over the screen. She could feel the heat rising in her chest again, just thinking about what had happened. I'm fine, just a little shaken up. Zoe's reply came almost instantly. You don't have to handle this alone, Maya. We're in this together, okay? Maya smiled at the message, a small spark of warmth breaking through the tension. Zoe was right. She didn't have to go through this alone. But as the day's events replayed in her mind, the weight of what was at stake felt heavier with every passing second. As the evening stretched on, Maya's thoughts wandered to her father. She hadn't spoken to him in days, and though he had called this morning, he hadn't given her much to go on. She missed him, more than she'd care to admit. He always knew how to make things feel better, how to take the edge off of any situation, no matter how bad. But right now he was somewhere far away, dealing with something classified, and there was nothing she could do to change that. After dinner, Maya retreated to her room, trying to get some peace before the night fully set in. But the buzzing anxiety in her chest wouldn't let her rest. Every time she closed her eyes, all she could see was Todd's face, his smirk as he leaned in close to her, the dangerous glint in his eyes. The confrontation felt like a warning, a promise that things were only going to get worse. Maya didn't want to be scared, but she couldn't ignore the gnawing feeling that Todd's threats were more than just words. He was the kind of man who didn't make empty threats. Her phone buzzed again, and this time it was a call from her dad. Her heart leaped in her chest as she immediately answered. Hey, kiddo! Daniel's voice came through, deep and steady, like a balm to her nerves. How's everything going? Maya took a deep breath, feeling the tension in her shoulders ease just a little. It's been rough, Dad. Ethan's uncle is making things hard. Daniel's voice grew serious. Todd? Yeah, Maya replied, her throat tightening at the mention of his name. He pulled me aside today, tried to intimidate me. Maya, her father interrupted gently, you don't have to explain it all right now. I'm proud of you. But listen to me. Don't take this lightly. Todd is a bully, and bullies don't stop until you stand up to them. Do you hear me? Maya nodded even though her father couldn't see it. I hear you, Dad. I won't back down. That's my girl, he said, his voice warm, full of pride. I'll be back soon, and we'll take care of everything. Until then, just keep your head up and stay safe. You're stronger than you think. Maya could feel a smile tugging at the corners of her lips. Thanks, Dad. I'll be okay. I promise. I know you will, he replied. I'll call again tomorrow. Stay sharp. As she hung up, a sense of calm washed over her. For a moment, she felt like everything might just be okay. But deep down, Maya knew it wouldn't be that simple. Todd wasn't going to let this go. He had already shown his hand, and now it was just a matter of when he would make his next move. The war had started, and Maya was caught right in the middle of it. She glanced out the window, her gaze meeting the darkening sky. The world outside seemed peaceful, unaware of the storm brewing just beneath the surface. But Maya knew better. Tomorrow was a new day, and things were about to get a whole lot more complicated. The next day at school, Maya walked through the halls with a sense of unease, her steps slower than usual. The air around her felt thick with tension, as if everyone in the building knew what had happened the day before. Whispers followed her as she moved, and though most of the comments were hushed, Maya could feel the weight of judgment in the air. Some were sympathetic, others skeptical, but it was impossible to ignore the fact that things were different now. She reached her locker, her fingers trembling slightly as she punched in the combination. The lock clicked open, and she quickly grabbed her books, trying to appear calm. But when she stood up, she noticed someone at the end of the hallway, Ethan Thompson. He was standing with his usual group, but today there was a marked difference. The others were avoiding him, their eyes cast downward as they muttered among themselves. Ethan, the ever-confident jock, looked smaller somehow. His posture was stiff, and the arrogant smirk that usually plastered his face was gone, replaced by something darker, more dangerous. Maya felt a strange combination of pity and anger toward him. He had been her tormentor for so long, the one who mocked her at every turn. Yet now, after yesterday's confrontation, she couldn't help but see him differently. His world, once filled with privilege and certainty, was crumbling. Still, that didn't change what he had done, what his uncle had done. She turned away, deciding to avoid Ethan and his group. The last thing she wanted to deal with today was more confrontation. As Maya made her way to her first class, she caught sight of Officer Todd Thompson's cruiser parked just outside the school entrance. Her stomach clenched. She had hoped that the encounter with him yesterday would be the last, but she knew deep down it was only the beginning. By the time lunch rolled around, Maya felt a wave of exhaustion settle over her. She met up with Zoe in the cafeteria, where the conversation turned quickly to the topic on everyone's mind. Officer Todd Thompson's latest act of intimidation. "Did you hear what happened?" Zoe asked, her voice low but urgent. "Some of the teachers are talking. They say Todd's been coming around here, talking to the principal about you." Maya's heart sank. She had been bracing for something like this, but hearing it confirmed still stung. "What is he trying to do?" she asked, trying to keep her voice steady. Zoe leaned in, lowering her voice even more. "They're saying he's pushing for you to be suspended, maybe even expelled. All over what happened with Ethan. He's got some kind of influence here, Maya. The principal, Mr. Winters, he's not going to go against Todd, not with his connections." Maya's fists clenched under the table. The anger she had been holding back surged to the surface. She knew Todd had power in this town. Everyone did. But this was a step too far. She wasn't about to let him ruin her life, not like this. "I'm not backing down," Maya said firmly, her voice filled with resolve. "I won't let him get away with it." Zoe met her gaze, a look of concern flickering in her eyes. "I get that, but be careful. You're up against a lot more than just Ethan and his uncle. These people have a way of making things disappear. They're not going to stop." Maya nodded, but inside a fire was starting to burn. She had never been one to just take it when people tried to push her down. Her father had taught her better than that. She wasn't going to let Todd Thompson, or anyone, control her. But what could she do? The system was clearly stacked against her. After lunch, as Maya walked to her next class, she felt her phone vibrate in her pocket. She pulled it out to see a message from her mother. "Maya, I need to talk to you when you get home. Something's come up." Maya's stomach twisted. She couldn't imagine what it was about, but with everything that had happened in the past few days, she knew it couldn't be good. She quickly typed back a reply. "Okay, Mom, I'll be home soon." When the school day ended, Maya's sense of dread only deepened. She wasn't looking forward to whatever conversation awaited her at home. But when she finally arrived, Lisa was already there, her face serious. There was no sign of her father, still away on his mission, but Maya could feel the weight of the unspoken tension in the room. "Sit down, Maya," Lisa said gently, gesturing toward the kitchen table. "We need to talk." Maya sat down, feeling the tightness in her chest again. "What's going on?" Lisa sighed, her fingers gripping the edge of the table. "It's about Todd Thompson and what happened today at the school." Maya's blood ran cold. "What do you mean? What happened?" "They're threatening to bring charges against you, Maya," Lisa said softly. "They're calling it assault, and it's because of what you did to Ethan. Todd's been pushing for it. He's even gone to the school board. He's making sure you're labeled as a troublemaker." Maya's mind raced. This was exactly what she had feared, but hearing it from her mother made it feel all the more real. "But I didn't do anything wrong," she protested. "I defended myself." Lisa looked at her daughter, her eyes filled with both concern and something else, something fierce. "I know that, honey, but this is bigger than just us now. They're coming after you, and we need to be prepared for what's next." Maya stood up, her anger boiling over. "This isn't fair. I won't just sit back and let them ruin my life like this. They're going to pay for this." Lisa stood up too, placing a calming hand on her daughter's arm. "I know, sweetheart, but we need to be smart. We can't just charge in without a plan. Todd's got connections and he's not going to back down. We need to find another way to fight back." Maya looked at her mother, her mind racing. What was the next move? What could she do to take down someone as powerful and corrupt as Todd Thompson? But as the doorbell rang, signaling the arrival of another visitor, Maya had a sinking feeling that she might already know the answer. The battle was just beginning, and this time, she wasn't going to face it alone. Maya turned toward the door as the bell rang again. Her heart skipped a beat. She hadn't expected anyone, and the timing of the visit felt far too ominous. Lisa, too, seemed to freeze for a moment, exchanging a glance with Maya before walking toward the door. Maya followed, her mind racing, trying to piece together who could be arriving at this late hour. When Lisa opened the door, Maya's stomach dropped. Standing in the doorway was Detective Sarah Reynolds, a woman Maya didn't know well, but had heard her father mention a few times over the years. She was tall, with dark hair pulled into a tight ponytail, and a professional but warm demeanor. There was something in her eyes, though, that told Maya this visit wasn't a social one. "Maya, Lisa," Detective Reynolds greeted them, her voice low and firm. "Can I come in? We need to talk." Lisa stepped aside without hesitation, motioning for her to enter. "Of course, Detective. What's going on?" As Reynolds entered, Maya felt a tight knot form in her stomach. This was serious. She could see the tension in her mother's shoulders, the slight tremble in her hands as she closed the door behind them. Maya could already feel the shift, the heavy weight of whatever news Reynolds had to deliver. Reynolds didn't waste time. She set her briefcase down on the kitchen table and turned to face them both. "I'm going to be blunt," she said, her voice grave. "We've been monitoring Todd Thompson's actions for a while now, and I'm afraid his influence is more extensive than we initially believed." Maya exchanged a worried glance with her mother. "What does that mean?" Maya asked, trying to keep the panic from creeping into her voice. Reynolds hesitated for a moment before continuing. "Todd's using his position to manipulate people, including the school and local law enforcement. We've been gathering evidence on him for a few months now, and things are starting to break wide open." Maya's mind raced. "So, you know everything about what he's been doing to me?" Reynolds nodded, her expression serious. "Yes, we've been tracking his movements, his connections, everything. But here's the thing, Maya," she added, glancing between mother and daughter. "He's not just targeting you. He's using you as a pawn in something much larger. He's been trying to protect a corrupt system, and you've become a threat to that system." Maya felt the weight of her words. The injustice of it all seemed even more profound now. She had no idea how deep this went, how far-reaching Todd's influence was. He wasn't just a local bully. He was part of a machine designed to protect itself at all costs, and Maya, by standing up to him, had become its target. "What does that mean for me?" Maya asked, her voice small despite her efforts to sound strong. Reynolds sighed, her shoulders sagging with the burden of the information she was sharing. "It means Todd will stop at nothing to crush you, to discredit you. He's already pushed for charges to be brought against you, and I'm afraid the school will fall in line with him." Maya's heart sank. "But that's not fair," she exclaimed, clenching her fists at her sides. "I didn't do anything wrong. I just defended myself." "I know that," Reynolds said softly. "We know that. But Todd is going to twist the narrative. He's got the power to make things happen in this town, and he's already manipulating the people who should be protecting you." Maya's mind whirled with the implications of this. "Then what can we do? How do we stop him?" Reynolds paused, clearly considering her next words carefully. "What I'm about to suggest is risky, but it's the only way we can truly get to him. We need to expose everything Todd's been doing. His corruption, the abuse of power, everything he's been hiding. If we don't, you're going to find yourself facing more than just accusations. You'll be buried under a mountain of lies and manipulation." Maya felt a surge of determination building inside her. This was the fight she hadn't anticipated, but it was one she couldn't walk away from. She had already come so far, stood up to Todd when everyone else stayed quiet. Now she was being asked to take the fight to another level. "Expose him?" Maya repeated, her voice firm. "How?" Reynolds gave her a long, measuring look. "We need you to help us gather the evidence. You're the one he's targeting, Maya. You're the one who can bring him down." Maya's stomach flipped at the idea of becoming an active part of this dangerous game. She knew what it meant. There was no going back once she made the choice. But she also knew one thing. Todd Thompson had crossed a line, and it was time for him to face the consequences. "You're asking me to help you take him down," Maya said, her voice steady. "I'm in." Reynolds smiled slightly, nodding in approval. "I knew you'd be strong enough, but I have to warn you, Maya, this won't be easy. Todd's not going to back down without a fight, and we need to be prepared for whatever comes next." Lisa, who had been silent until now, stepped forward. "What exactly are you asking her to do, Detective?" Reynolds turned to face Lisa. "We need Maya to continue being the target. We need Todd to keep coming after her, to keep making the same mistakes. And when he does, we'll have the proof we need to bring him down. But Maya has to keep her head in the game. We'll be with her every step of the way. Maya nodded, her resolve hardening. Let's do it. As the conversation moved on, with Reynolds explaining the logistics and what the next steps would be, Maya found herself caught between fear and determination. This was bigger than anything she had imagined, but there was no turning back now. Todd Thompson had made a grave mistake targeting her, and now with the help of Detective Reynolds and her father's legacy of fighting for what was right, Maya was ready to take him down. The war wasn't just beginning, it was already underway. The days after Maya's decision felt like a blur. Every time she stepped outside, she half expected to see a police cruiser lurking around the corner or hear the ominous hum of a threatening phone call. But it wasn't just the fear of Todd's next move that had her on edge. It was the sense that everything had changed. She wasn't just a student anymore, wasn't just the girl standing up to the bully. Now she was part of something bigger, a much larger fight, and the stakes felt higher than ever before. Detective Reynolds had arranged for Maya to meet with her team the following day after school. Maya had spent the morning going over everything she knew about Todd Thompson's actions, the incidents with her at school, the water bottle incident, his abuse of power that reached far beyond her. But that wasn't enough. Maya wasn't just going to sit back and let the evidence be handed to her. She had to dig deeper, to make herself a target, just as Reynolds had suggested. She couldn't help but feel the weight of that decision, knowing that it would mean pushing herself even further into the line of fire. When the bell rang for the end of the school day, Maya headed straight to the parking lot, where Detective Reynolds was waiting in her unmarked car. Maya slid into the passenger seat, her stomach twisting with anticipation. "You ready?" Reynolds asked, glancing over at her. Maya nodded, though her nerves felt like a knot in her stomach. "I don't really have a choice, do I?" Reynolds gave her a reassuring smile. "No, but I think you're stronger than you know, and you've already shown that you can stand your ground." Maya appreciated the words, but a part of her wasn't sure she believed them. She had faced off with Ethan and Todd before, but now she was playing a much more dangerous game. If Todd suspected she was on to him, it could all backfire. But there was no turning back. She had already made her choice. The drive to the meeting spot felt long, each passing minute drawing her closer to something she couldn't quite see, but knew would change everything. The old industrial park outside town had been abandoned for years, its rusted steel gates and empty buildings, an eerie reminder of what had been. Maya's heart pounded as they pulled up to the parking lot, where several of Reynolds' colleagues were already waiting. "Let's go," Reynolds said, opening her door. Maya followed her into the small, dimly lit room where they would meet. Inside, a few people sat around a table, their faces serious. One of them, a man with sharp eyes and a military-like demeanor, stood up as they entered. "This is our first official meeting, Maya," Reynolds began. "Everyone here knows what's at stake. We're all in this together." Maya nodded, trying to ignore the growing pit in her stomach. She'd been part of groups before, school clubs, academic teams. But this was nothing like that. This was real. These people weren't just helping her for the sake of a cause. They were risking their lives to take down one of the most powerful figures in their town. "This is Will," Reynolds said, pointing to the man who had stood up. "He's ex-military, special forces. He's here to help with security and surveillance. He'll be working closely with you." Will gave her a curt nod. "I've been tracking Todd's movements for a while now. I know how he operates." The others in the room, two women and a man who didn't say much, nodded in agreement. It was clear they were all professionals, and Maya's anxiety began to settle just a little. She wasn't alone in this fight. They had all seen the same evidence, understood the same dangers, and now they were moving forward together. "Okay, here's the plan," Reynolds continued, pulling up a map of Jefferson on the table. "We need to keep Todd on the defensive. He's making moves, but he doesn't realize just how much we've already learned. The key is getting him to slip up, to show us something we can use. Maya, we need you to keep drawing attention to yourself, keep him focused on you. The more he tries to silence you, the more he exposes himself." Maya's heart was hammering in her chest. "What exactly do you want me to do?" Reynolds smiled, but it wasn't a comforting smile. It was the kind of smile a person wears when they're preparing for battle. "It's simple. We're going to use everything he's done to you. The rumors, the intimidation, everything. We'll make sure it's all on the record. And when the time comes, we'll show the world what he really is." Maya looked at the map again, her mind whirling. It all felt like so much to take in. This wasn't just about Ethan anymore, or even about Todd. This was about a corrupt system that had been operating unchecked for far too long, and Maya was in the center of it, the pawn who would help take it all down. "What if he comes after me again?" Maya asked, her voice low but filled with determination. "What if he tries to hurt me?" "Then we'll be ready," Reynolds said firmly. "We've already started to dig into Todd's connections. There's a web of corruption we need to untangle, and it's going to get messy. But if you stay smart and follow the plan, we can bring him down without him even knowing what hit him." Maya's mind was already spinning with the possibilities. She had no illusions about what lay ahead. This wasn't just about standing up to a bully anymore. This was about taking down a corrupt system that had been in place for far too long. And if she was going to be the one to do it, then she needed to be ready for whatever came next. Reynolds gave her a hard look, as if gauging Maya's readiness. "This is bigger than you think. Are you sure you're prepared for what's coming?" Maya took a deep breath, nodding with newfound resolve. "I am." The silence in the room felt heavy, but it wasn't oppressive. Instead, it was a shared understanding. Maya wasn't just some scared teenager anymore. She was a force in this fight, and with Reynolds and the others, she was about to take the first step in a war she couldn't afford to lose. The next few days passed in a blur of secret meetings, planning, and preparing. Maya's role in the operation had become clear, and although she had always been the type to act on her instincts, this felt different. Every decision carried weight now. Every action was a move in a much larger game, one that she hadn't asked to be a part of, but could no longer avoid. Maya found herself in a delicate balance, walking the line between keeping her head low and drawing attention to herself. Detective Reynolds had been clear. The more Todd focused on her, the more he would reveal his own vulnerabilities. Maya had to be the bait. She had to be the one to provoke him into making a mistake. It wasn't easy. At school, things were tense. The students were quieter now, avoiding Maya in the hallways, their whispers growing louder with every step she took. They'd all heard the rumors, seen the damage to her locker, and most of all, they'd seen her face off with Ethan. It didn't help that her confrontation with Ethan was still the talk of the school. His side of the story had already been twisted and spread, and in the eyes of many, she was the aggressor. But Maya refused to let that get to her. She had bigger things to worry about. One afternoon, Maya was sitting in the library pretending to study for an upcoming test when her phone buzzed with a message from Zoe. "Ethan's been talking. He's been going around telling people about his encounter with you. He's making you out to be a violent person. He's even telling people you've got a criminal record. Watch out." Maya's grip on her phone tightened. This wasn't just about bullying anymore. This was a calculated smear campaign. Ethan had to be working with Todd on this, making sure her reputation was tarnished before she could do any real damage. Her chest tightened as she put the phone down. She wasn't sure how much of what Ethan was saying was a lie, and how much was just a reflection of his hurt ego. But one thing was clear. Todd's grip on this town was as strong as ever. He'd made sure to plant the seeds of doubt before Maya had even had a chance to defend herself. She pushed the thought aside for now. There would be time to address it later, but her focus needed to stay on the bigger picture. Later that evening, Maya met up with Reynolds again. They were in the same old industrial park, sitting in a different room now, one that was a bit more secure, where they could talk without worrying about anyone overhearing. Reynolds had gathered a few more members of her team, each one of them professionals with their own areas of expertise. Maya couldn't help but feel like a small piece of a much larger puzzle now. "We've got an update," Reynolds said as soon as Maya walked in. She was standing by a table covered with files and maps, a dry erase board in the corner filled with names and connections. It looked like the kind of operation Maya had seen in movies, the kind that was supposed to be organized and precise. "What's going on?" Maya asked, settling into the seat that had been reserved for her. Reynolds nodded, flipping through the papers. "We've got eyes on Todd. He's making a lot of moves lately. Calls to the school board, meetings with people in the mayor's office. It's becoming clear he's preparing for something big." We think he's trying to lock down his power before we can fully expose him. Maya's stomach twisted. What does that mean for me? How do we stop him? That's where you come in, Reynolds said, her gaze steady. We need to make sure Todd doesn't get away with this. We're going to start documenting everything. Every conversation, every move he makes. We need him to slip up, Maya. And we need you to keep drawing attention to yourself. I know it's risky, but it's the only way we're going to catch him in the act. Maya clenched her fists. I've already got enough attention. The whole school's talking about me, and I'm getting threats. Todd's not going to stop. He'll just find another way to come after me. Reynolds met her gaze, her expression unwavering. I know it's hard, but this isn't just about you anymore. It's about taking down an entire system. You're the key to making that happen. Todd needs to see that he's not untouchable. If you let him intimidate you, if you back down now, we lose. Maya swallowed hard. She understood the weight of what she was being asked to do. It wasn't just about fighting Todd anymore. It was about dismantling everything he had worked so hard to build. The influence, the corruption, it had all started with him, and if Maya couldn't take him down, no one could. She stood up, suddenly feeling the full weight of the decision she had made. But something inside of her, something deep and unshakable, told her she couldn't walk away. She had already come too far, and no matter what it cost her, she wasn't going to stop now. I'm ready, Maya said, her voice firm. Let's bring him down. Reynolds gave her a nod of approval, her expression softening just slightly. Good. We're going to need everything you've got, Maya, and we'll be with you every step of the way. As the meeting wrapped up, Maya couldn't shake the feeling that things were moving faster than she was ready for. But there was no turning back. Todd Thompson had pushed her too far, and now the war was on. She could feel it in her bones. The battle wasn't just for justice anymore. It was for her future, her reputation, and everything she stood for. And if she had to fight this war alone, she would. Because if there was one thing her father had taught her, it was this. The only way to win is to keep fighting. Maya felt like she was walking a razor's edge, balancing on the thin line between control and chaos. The weight of the task ahead pressed heavily on her, and every decision felt like it could shift the balance. One wrong move, and she would lose everything. It was the kind of pressure she'd never anticipated at school. Being a student, being Maya, felt worlds away from the position she now found herself in. This wasn't just about grades or debates anymore. This was about survival. She had learned to ignore the whispers, the sidelong glances, the murmurs in the hallway. Every day it seemed like the rumors were growing louder. They were no longer just about her fight with Ethan. They were about her character, her reputation, how she was supposedly a troublemaker, an instigator. Even some of the teachers looked at her differently, their polite smiles hiding the suspicion they now felt. Maya tried to keep focused. As much as she wanted to scream, to lash out, she knew it wouldn't help her cause. She was part of a bigger plan now. Every word, every action had to be calculated. One afternoon after school, Maya met with Detective Reynolds at a local cafe. The place was quiet, the hum of conversation and the clink of coffee cups the only background noise. Reynolds had been monitoring Todd's activities closely, but things were escalating, and they needed to stay one step ahead. Maya had agreed to meet her after classes, ready to do whatever it took. Maya, Reynolds said, her voice low and urgent. Things are heating up. Todd's making moves, and he's more dangerous than we thought. We've gotten some intel. He's got a group of officers backing him, but he's also getting cozy with people on the outside. The mayor's office, local businesses. The whole system is coming together to protect him. Maya felt her stomach tighten. What does that mean for me? She asked, her voice barely above a whisper. Reynolds paused, her eyes serious. It means he'll stop at nothing to keep his grip on power. He's already trying to pressure the school board. They'll probably make a move against you soon. Suspension, maybe worse. Maya took a deep breath. I won't back down. I know you won't, Reynolds said, a flicker of approval in her eyes. But here's the thing. We can't keep playing defense. We need to go on the offense. We need to gather more evidence. Push Todd into a corner. Maya's pulse quickened. How? Reynolds slid a folder across the table. opening it to reveal a series of photographs and documents. We've got a few things we can work with. His interactions with local businesses, the phone calls he's made, and there's a pattern of bribes we've identified. We're going to use that to start building pressure. We need to make sure Todd feels like there's nowhere to run. Maya leaned forward, her eyes scanning the papers. What do you need me to do? We need to get Todd's people talking. We need him to slip up, to let something out. We're going to set up a few conversations, some meetings. Nothing big, nothing obvious. But you'll be the one who sparks it all. Maya frowned. You want me to bait him, don't you? Reynolds didn't flinch. Exactly. We're going to make him think he's in control, but we're going to use that to pull the rug out from under him. He'll get too comfortable, too confident, and that's when he'll make the mistake we need. Maya wasn't sure she was ready for what was being asked of her. She had already risked so much by standing up to Todd and Ethan, but now she was stepping into a much more dangerous game. She was the one they were going to use to get to Todd, the one they would rely on to pull the trigger. But what other choice did she have? If she stepped back now, if she let Todd continue his reign of terror, it would be worse for everyone, especially for the people who couldn't fight back. People like her father's old friends, the ones who had no voice in a system that was rigged from the start. She had already made her decision. I'm in, Maya said, her voice firm. Reynolds smiled slightly. I knew you'd be, but we have to move fast. Todd's on edge. He knows something's coming. He's starting to lash out. If we're not careful, he could go off the rails, and we don't want that. Maya nodded. What's the next step? Tonight, Reynolds said, her voice turning serious again. We're going to start setting things in motion. I need you to meet with someone, an informant who has some inside information. We've already arranged for the meeting. You'll be going to a bar just outside town. It's under the radar, which means it's perfect for what we need. We need to find out who Todd is talking to, who he's meeting with. Maya didn't flinch at the mention of a bar. She had seen her father's world, had heard the stories of covert meetings, whispered deals, and everything in between. This wasn't unfamiliar. What was unfamiliar was being the one at the center of it all, the one playing a part in something this complicated. I'll do it, she said. Reynolds leaned back, eyeing her for a moment before nodding. Good. Just remember, this is a delicate operation. Todd's people are watching. We have to be careful. As they wrapped up the meeting, Maya felt a strange mix of anxiety and anticipation. The weight of everything ahead of her felt heavy, but for the first time in weeks, she could almost taste the possibility of victory. She wasn't just fighting for herself anymore. She was fighting for everyone who had been silenced by people like Todd, and she wouldn't stop until he was brought down. The evening arrived faster than Maya anticipated. She couldn't shake the feeling of unease that had settled in her stomach. Tonight wasn't just another night. It was the beginning of something far larger, something that could change everything. As she walked into her bedroom, she found herself staring at the clothes in her closet, unsure of what to wear. This wasn't a regular night out. She wasn't trying to look good, but she had to look the part. After a few moments, Maya chose a simple black jacket and a pair of dark jeans. Nothing too flashy, but just enough to blend in. It wasn't a formal event. It was a mission, and she had to be prepared. She had no illusions about the danger she was walking into. A bar on the outskirts of town, quiet, hidden, was the perfect place for Todd's people to gather without raising suspicion. But it was also the perfect place for trouble. As she got ready, Maya glanced at the framed photo of her father on her nightstand. It was an old one, taken during one of his homecomings. He was smiling, his military uniform crisp and perfectly put together, a far cry from the man she knew now. The man who, in his absence, had taught her everything she knew about standing tall, about never backing down. She felt a knot in her throat. She wished more than anything that he was there. But her father had made it clear that this was her fight now. Maya, you ready? Lisa called from downstairs, breaking her from her thoughts. Yeah, just about, Maya replied, checking her phone one last time. No new messages. The drive to the bar was short but felt longer than it was. Maya's mind was racing, thinking about all the potential dangers, wondering if she had made the right decision by agreeing to this. There was so much at stake. One wrong move, and everything could fall apart. But she knew she couldn't go back now. She had committed, and there was no turning around. The bar was tucked away in a small part of town, an old building with a faded sign hanging above the door. The parking lot was almost empty, except for a few cars scattered here and there. Maya's heart began to race as she parked and stepped out of the car, her nerves getting the best of her. As she walked inside, the dim lighting and the sound of soft music created a sense of disconnection from the world outside. The place felt like a secret, hidden in plain sight. Maya moved to the bar, where she saw the informant she was supposed to meet. He was a tall man, wearing a jacket that was too large for him, his eyes darting nervously as he scanned the room. "You Maya?" he asked, his voice low and quick. She nodded, sliding onto the stool next to him. "Yeah, you got the info?" The man glanced around before leaning in, lowering his voice. "Yeah, I've got what you need. But it's gonna cost you. Todd Thompson's not someone you want to mess with. He's got his claws in places you wouldn't believe." Maya leaned forward, her eyes hardening. "I know what he's capable of. I'm not here for a warning. I need the truth. I need to know what he's doing." The informant hesitated for a moment, but then he sighed. "Fine. I've been working with some of his guys. Been tracking him for a while now. Todd's got a lot of people in his pocket, some of them in places you'd never expect. He's got a hand in local businesses, running protection rackets. He's pulling strings with the school board, too. You're not the first kid he's tried to ruin, but you're the one who got his attention." Maya felt a chill crawl up her spine. This was bigger than she had imagined. It wasn't just about her. Todd was running a full operation, a system of fear that extended far beyond the police force. And now she was the one who had to stop it. "I'm not afraid of him," Maya said, her voice steady, though the fear was bubbling just beneath the surface. "How do we get him? How do we take him down?" The informant took a long drink from his glass, clearly stalling. Finally, he set the glass down and looked her in the eye. "We need to hit him where it hurts. You've got to get in close. He trusts some of his people, but there's a crack in his empire. If we expose him, if we get the right people talking—" Maya waited, her patience wearing thin. "What's the plan?" The informant's face tightened. "We need someone inside, someone close enough to get real evidence, something he can't deny. You're going to have to get to his inner circle." Maya's heart skipped a beat. "You want me to get close to him? Are you serious?" He nodded. "It's the only way. You've got the skills, the smarts. If you do this right, we can take him down for good." Maya's mind raced as she processed his words. Getting close to Todd was dangerous. It was like walking into the lion's den and hoping the lion wouldn't notice. But what choice did she have? She had already made up her mind. She wasn't going to back down. "All right," Maya said, determination in her voice. "I'll do it." The informant's eyes flickered with something like relief, but it was gone just as quickly. "Good. You're going to need a lot more than just information. You'll need to play the game. Todd doesn't trust easily, but if you keep feeding him what he wants, you might just get a crack in his armor." Maya nodded. "How do I get started?" "Stay close to Ethan," the informant said almost reluctantly. "He's more than just a pawn in Todd's game. He's part of it too. You'll need to use him. He's the key to getting Todd to trust you." Maya's stomach lurched. She hadn't anticipated this. Using Ethan? The thought left a bad taste in her mouth, but she understood. This wasn't just about fighting Todd anymore. It was about taking down everything he represented. And if Ethan was the means to that end, then she'd have to play along. As she left the bar, Maya's thoughts were spinning. She had just agreed to something that felt bigger than anything she had ever imagined. She was about to step into the lion's den, and this time, she wasn't just the prey. Maya didn't expect the feeling of dread that crept up her spine as she entered Jefferson High the next morning. She had been preparing for this day for weeks, but somehow, nothing could have fully prepared her for the weight of what she was about to do. The halls, which had once seemed like a place of routine and safety, now felt like a battlefield. And in this fight, she wasn't sure who her allies were, or even who she could trust. The plan had been set. She had to get close to Ethan, draw him in, make him believe she was working alongside him to take Todd down. It was dangerous, yes, but Maya knew that there were no easy choices left. The more she thought about it, the clearer it became. She was playing a game she couldn't afford to lose. If she didn't take this step, then Todd would tighten his grip on the town even further. She couldn't let that happen. As Maya walked down the hallway, she could feel the weight of the eyes that followed her. They weren't just students, they were a part of Todd's system, the same system that had tried to break her down. She had to pretend she was still the same girl. Just another student, just another face in the crowd. But deep down, she was anything but ordinary now. She was a part of something bigger, something dangerous. At the end of the hallway, she spotted Ethan. He was leaning against his locker, looking distracted, his eyes not quite focused. For a brief moment, she hesitated. She had never imagined having to use Ethan like this. The thought felt like a betrayal, but she pushed the feeling aside. He was part of Todd's machine, and if she didn't take him down, he would continue to be. "Ethan," she said, her voice steady but cold. He looked up at her, surprise flickering across his face before quickly being replaced by something else. A wall went up behind his eyes and he straightened, attempting to regain his usual cocky demeanor. "Maya," he said, his voice guarded. "What do you want?" Maya swallowed the frustration she felt. This wasn't about them anymore. This was about taking Todd down. "We need to talk," she said, her tone leaving no room for argument. Ethan's gaze flicked over his shoulder, making sure no one else was around. "About what?" he asked, clearly reluctant. "About your uncle," Maya replied, lowering her voice. "We both know he's been playing us, but I think we can use that to our advantage." Ethan's expression faltered, just for a second, but Maya caught it. She was getting under his skin. That was the first step. "Why should I trust you?" he asked, his voice full of disbelief. But there was a hint of doubt now, a crack in his armor. Maya's heart pounded, but she kept her face neutral. This was it. This was where she either lost him or gained him. "You don't have to trust me," she said, "but if we don't do something, we'll both end up buried under the same system. I'm not playing his game anymore, Ethan. You shouldn't either." She could see the wheels turning in his mind, and Maya knew he was close to breaking. The anger, the shame, the confusion, it was all mixing together in his head. He had always relied on his uncle, his family for validation, but now Maya was offering him something else, the truth. "Fine," Ethan said finally, his voice tight, "but I'm not doing this alone. You're not the only one who wants Todd gone." Maya's pulse quickened. This was exactly what she had been waiting for. "We'll do this together," she said, her voice firm, "but we need to keep this between us. If Todd finds out what we're doing—" "I know," Ethan interrupted, his tone serious now. "He'll come after us. I get it." Maya nodded. "We'll have to be smart, but we have a chance. We just need to stay ahead of him." Ethan stared at her for a long moment, and for the first time, Maya saw something different in his eyes. Something resembling respect. It was a fleeting look, but it was there. She could see that he was starting to believe in what she was saying. "I'll help," he said, his voice quieter now. "But don't think for a second that I'm doing this for you. I'm doing this for myself, for what he's done." Maya's heart clenched, but she pushed the feeling down. She couldn't afford to feel sorry for Ethan. Not anymore. "We're on the same side now," she said, meeting his gaze. "And that's all that matters." The bell rang, signaling the end of the passing period. Ethan quickly closed his locker and glanced at her, his face hardening again. "We'll talk later. I'll keep my distance. Don't trust anyone, especially not Todd's people." Maya watched him walk away, the weight of their unspoken agreement hanging between them. For a moment, she wasn't sure if this was the right move, but deep down, she knew it was. The only way to defeat Todd was to break his hold over the people closest to him. And if that meant using Ethan, if it meant betraying his trust, then that was what she had to do. But the more she thought about it, the more she realized this wasn't just about Todd anymore. It was about changing everything. The whole system had to be exposed, and if she was the one to bring it down, then she would. Maya's steps felt heavier as she made her way to class, the weight of her decision settling deeper into her chest. But there was no turning back now. She had made her choice. She was already in this fight, and it was one she couldn't afford to lose. The days following her conversation with Ethan felt like a delicate balance between uncertainty and action. Maya knew she had to tread carefully. One misstep could unravel everything. She spent most of her time studying Todd's behavior, trying to gauge his next move. He had been quiet lately, and Maya couldn't decide if it was because he was regrouping or if he had underestimated her. Either way, she knew that time was running out. Ethan, though, was proving to be a more difficult puzzle than she had anticipated. He had agreed to help, but Maya couldn't shake the feeling that he wasn't entirely on her side yet. The moment they had shared in the hallway seemed genuine, but there were still walls up between them, walls that would take more than a few conversations to break down. Maya had to remain focused. He was a means to an end, and while she could see the cracks in his loyalty to Todd, she knew that trust had to be earned. Despite the tension with Ethan, Maya had no choice but to follow through. She met with Reynolds and the team once again, debriefing them on her conversation with Ethan. They had planned every move meticulously, but now that Maya was in deeper than ever, the risks had escalated. Reynolds sat across from Maya, a file spread out before her. "How did it go?" she asked, not looking up from the papers. "He's in," Maya said, her voice steady despite the whirlwind of thoughts racing through her mind. "But he's not fully committed. I don't know if he'll follow through if it gets too dangerous." Reynolds nodded thoughtfully. "You can't control that. But what you can control is your next move. If you keep him close, we can gather intel on Todd's operations, who he's meeting, what he's planning. We need to stay 2 steps ahead." Maya nodded. She understood. "I'll keep working on him, but we need more information. We need to know who Todd's talking to. What's his next move?" "That's where we come in," Reynolds replied. "We've been able to tap into some of Todd's communications. There's a meeting tomorrow night at the old warehouse by the river. We think he's meeting with some of his connections from the city. If we can get someone inside, we'll have everything we need to take him down." Maya's stomach twisted. "You want me to go in?" Reynolds met her gaze unflinching. "We need you there. You're the only one Todd will trust enough to let into that circle, but you have to be careful. If anyone even suspects what we're doing, it's over." Maya's mind was reeling. She had come this far, and now she was being asked to go deeper. She would be stepping directly into Todd's world, pretending to be one of his own. The risks were higher than ever, but she had no other choice. This was the opportunity they had been waiting for. If she could get inside and gather the evidence, they could finally expose him. "What's the plan once I'm inside?" Maya asked, her voice steady but filled with uncertainty. "You'll be close to Todd, close enough to hear everything. We need you to plant a bug in his office, something that will record the conversations. Once we have that, we can take it to the authorities. But Maya, you have to blend in. Don't draw attention. We can't afford for this to backfire." Maya swallowed hard, nodding slowly. The weight of the mission was pressing on her, but she knew she couldn't back down. Not now. The plan was simple, but dangerous. The old warehouse by the river was known to be a place where shady deals took place, and Todd had been using it as a meeting spot for months. If Maya could get in, she would have access to everything. The people Todd trusted, his future plans, the evidence they needed to bring him down. It was everything they had been working toward, but the risks were more than she had ever faced before. Later that night, Maya stood in front of her mirror, adjusting her black jacket and checking her appearance one last time. She had to look the part. Confident, capable, and most importantly, trustworthy. She wasn't just going into that warehouse as Maya Carter anymore. She was going in as someone else, someone who could blend in with Todd's world. Her phone buzzed and she glanced down at the message. It was from Ethan. "You sure about this?" "It's not too late to back out." Maya stared at the screen for a moment, her fingers hovering over the keys. She could tell him the truth, that she was terrified. She could tell him that everything felt like it was spiraling out of control, but instead she typed back, "No turning back now. I'm doing this. I need you to help me. Stay close." She hit send, the message disappearing into the ether. A few seconds later, her phone buzzed again. "I'll be there." Maya put the phone down and took one last look at herself in the mirror. There was no room for fear anymore. She couldn't afford it. As she stepped out the door and into the night, she felt the weight of her decision. She was about to enter Todd's world, to walk straight into the lion's den, but she had to, for her family, for the people who couldn't fight back, for the justice that had been denied for too long. She drove to the warehouse, her hands gripping the steering wheel, the silence in the car only broken by the occasional click of her turn signal. As she approached the building, she could already see the faint glow of lights in the distance. This was it. She was ready. The warehouse loomed ahead, its darkened silhouette outlined by the dim, flickering streetlights. Maya felt a strange sense of detachment as she pulled into the parking lot. The world outside seemed distant, as though she was stepping into another dimension entirely, one that operated by its own rules, its own logic. She could feel the tension in her muscles, the hum of adrenaline making her heart beat faster. But she knew she had to keep calm. If she faltered now, everything would fall apart. The plan had been simple. Get inside, blend in, and gather information. What she hadn't expected was the suffocating silence that greeted her as she entered the building. The usual buzz of activity, the kind she imagined would be present in a place like this, was absent. Instead, the air felt thick, and each step she took echoed in the vast emptiness. Her eyes adjusted to the dim light, and she made her way to the back of the warehouse. There, near the old wooden crates, stacked haphazardly in one corner, stood a group of men. Most of them were dressed in dark suits, their faces hidden in shadow. Maya's throat tightened as she recognized Todd in the center, his posture commanding and self-assured. His presence was unmistakable, the kind that demanded attention without a single word spoken. She froze for a moment, just inside the door, watching them. Todd was talking to a tall, well-built man Maya hadn't seen before, someone who carried himself with a certain cold authority. The tension in the air was palpable, and Maya's instincts screamed at her to turn back, to leave before things escalated. But there was no turning back now. She had made her choice, and there was no room for hesitation. Stepping forward, Maya put on her most confident expression and walked toward the group. She moved deliberately, her footsteps steady, as if she belonged there. She could hear the low murmur of voices, but Todd's gaze snapped to her the moment she entered the room. "Ah, Maya," he said, his voice dripping with false warmth. "I was wondering when you'd show up." Maya's heart skipped a beat, but she kept her face neutral. "You didn't think I'd miss the chance to talk business, did you?" she replied smoothly, her voice low and controlled. Todd smiled, but it didn't reach his eyes. He gestured for her to come closer. "I trust you've been keeping up with things." Maya nodded, stepping closer. She glanced around the room, taking in the faces of the men standing with Todd. None of them looked familiar, but that wasn't what caught her attention. What mattered was the tension in their eyes, the suspicion that seemed to hang between them all. Maya knew then that Todd wasn't just meeting with these men, he was preparing for something. "Of course," Maya replied, her gaze briefly flicking to the tall man standing next to Todd. "But you know there's always more to the story, Todd. Always something new to learn." Todd chuckled, a sound that sent a shiver down her spine. "I like your attitude, Maya. Always hungry for more. But there's only so much you can know, even when you think you're in control." Maya fought the instinct to respond. She had to keep the conversation moving, to keep him distracted while she figured out her next move. "So," she began, keeping her tone light, "what exactly are we working with here? You've been making some moves. I'm curious to know what's next." Todd's eyes narrowed slightly. He leaned in, lowering his voice. "What we're working with, Maya, is something that could change everything. But you need to be patient. You're in the right place at the right time, but there's no room for mistakes." Maya's pulse quickened, but she kept her composure. This was it, the first piece of information she needed. She had to make him think she was fully on board, that she was part of his world. But what did he mean by changing everything? The question lingered in her mind as Todd continued talking. "We've got plans, big ones that'll put this town back in its place," Todd said, his eyes darkening with something Maya couldn't quite place. "And you, Maya, you're going to help me make sure it all goes smoothly." Her mind raced as she processed the words. Help him? Help him do what? She had to be careful. Todd was trying to reel her in, make her feel like she was a part of something larger than herself. But she wasn't. She was using him, and she needed to make sure he didn't catch on. Maya's gaze shifted to the tall man who had been standing off to the side, watching the interaction with interest. His cold eyes studied her, assessing her every move. Maya didn't recognize him, but she had a feeling she would soon. It was clear that Todd trusted him, Whoever he was, far more than the others in the room, his presence was unsettling, and Maya couldn't shake the feeling that he was the real threat in this room, not Todd. Before Maya could say anything else, the man stepped forward, his hand extended. "I'm Alex," he said, his voice clipped, his tone flat. "I've heard a lot about you." Maya took his hand, forcing a smile. "I'm sure it's all been good." Alex's expression remained unreadable, his grip firm. "Let's hope so," he said cryptically, before releasing her hand. Todd watched the exchange closely, but he didn't seem concerned. "Alex here will be working with you closely from now on. He's got a mind for strategy, and he's the one who's been pulling a lot of the strings." Maya nodded, her mind already turning. Alex was someone she needed to keep an eye on. There was something about him, something in his eyes that made her uneasy. "I'm looking forward to working with you," Maya said, her voice as steady as she could manage. Todd gave a satisfied smile, clearly pleased with her response. "Good. Now why don't you sit down? Let's talk business." As Maya took a seat at the table, her mind was already racing. This was no longer just about gathering information. It was about staying alive long enough to see this plan through. The tension in the room had shifted, and she was now a part of it. The web was closing in, and she was the center of it all. Maya sat quietly, her eyes scanning the room, absorbing every detail. She had to remain in control to keep her mind focused on the task at hand. Todd had always been dangerous, but now, with Alex in the mix, things felt even more precarious. There was something about Alex that unsettled her. His calm demeanor, his sharp, calculating eyes made her feel like she was being sized up in ways she wasn't ready for. Todd's arrogance was predictable, but Alex's quiet intensity was a different kind of threat. As Todd continued to speak, Maya let his words wash over her without truly listening. He was talking about plans, about taking control of the town, about making moves that would change everything. The more he spoke, the more it became clear that he wasn't just a corrupt cop. He had ambitions, and they were far bigger than anyone had realized. Maya had thought she was just fighting against a rogue officer, but now she was up against a man who was trying to reshape the entire system to his will. "Everything is in place," Todd was saying, a smug smile creeping across his face. "All we need now is someone who can get things moving on the inside. You're in a perfect position, Maya. You know the right people. You've got the right connections. You can be a key player in all this." Maya fought the urge to roll her eyes. She couldn't let him know how much she despised him, how every word out of his mouth made her skin crawl. "I'll do what I can," she said, keeping her voice steady. "But I need more details. What exactly are we trying to achieve here?" Todd chuckled, clearly amused by her question. "Ah, always the inquisitive one. You'll find out soon enough. Let's just say we're going to make sure that everyone understands who's in charge. We're going to reshape this town in our image." The words hung in the air, heavy with meaning. Maya didn't need him to elaborate. She knew exactly what he meant. He wasn't just about controlling Jefferson. He was talking about creating a system where people like him, people with power, could bend everything and everyone to their will. And Maya was going to be his tool, the one who helped him pull the strings. A chill ran through her as she realized how deep she was in this. She had come here tonight thinking she could just gather information, find some cracks in Todd's armor. But now she understood. She was more than just a participant. She was a pawn in his game. "All right," she said, nodding slowly. "I'm in. I'll help you get things moving. But I want to make sure I'm not just another piece on your chessboard. I want to know how I fit into all this." Todd smiled, the smirk spreading across his face like a predator sizing up its prey. "You'll find out soon enough. For now, just follow my lead. Let's see how much control you can handle." Maya held her gaze steady, but inside her stomach twisted. She had no intention of being controlled, not by Todd, and certainly not by Alex. She had to play the game, keep pretending that she was on their side, all while gathering the evidence she needed to bring them down. There was no way she was going to let Todd have the victory. She had learned too much, seen too much. This wasn't just about protecting herself anymore. It was about stopping the cycle of corruption before it spread any further. Alex's eyes were on her again, sharp and calculating. He said nothing, but his gaze made her feel as though he was reading her every thought. She didn't like how exposed she felt in his presence, and yet she knew she had no choice but to face him head on. The meeting dragged on, the men talking strategy while Maya sat in silence, trying to appear as though she was fully invested in what was happening around her. It was a delicate dance. Every time she spoke, every time she nodded or asked a question, she had to make sure it was convincing. She couldn't slip up, not even for a second. If Todd or Alex suspected that she was playing them, everything would fall apart. Eventually, the meeting ended, and Maya stood up, eager to get out of the suffocating atmosphere of the warehouse. Todd gave her a look that was almost approving, though there was something in his eyes that made Maya uneasy. "You did well tonight," Todd said, his voice low and almost conspiratorial. "You'll see. This is just the beginning." Maya nodded, her heart pounding. She had to get out of there, get back to the safety of her own home, and regroup. She wasn't sure how much longer she could keep up the act, but she had no choice. Not when the stakes were this high. As she walked to the door, Alex followed her with his gaze, his expression unreadable. Maya's breath caught in her throat. She could feel the weight of his scrutiny, like he was waiting for her to slip, just waiting for her to make a mistake. She couldn't afford that. Not now. Once outside, Maya quickly made her way to her car. The night air felt cool against her skin, a sharp contrast to the heat building inside her chest. The weight of the meeting pressed down on her, but she knew she couldn't let it show. She had a role to play now, a dangerous game that she couldn't afford to lose. The drive back home was long and silent, her mind racing with everything she had learned. She couldn't shake the thought of Todd's words. "We're going to reshape this town in our image." As she pulled into her driveway, she exhaled, trying to steady her thoughts. She had been so close to uncovering something tonight, but it wasn't enough. Not yet. She couldn't stop now. Maya knew what she had to do next. She had to go deeper into Todd's world, gather more information, and find the evidence that would expose everything. But for now, she had to regroup. Tomorrow was another day, and with it, another step closer to bringing Todd down. Maya sat on the edge of her bed, staring at the dim light filtering through the curtains. The quiet of the room was a stark contrast to the storm raging inside her mind. The meeting with Todd and Alex had gone exactly as she expected, but now she was left with more questions than answers. The weight of what she had learned was pressing down on her chest, making it hard to breathe. She had thought that getting close to Todd would be the hardest part, but now that she was in his world, his twisted, dangerous world, Maya wasn't sure how much longer she could keep up the act. Every time Todd smiled at her, every time Alex looked at her with that cold, calculating gaze, it felt like a noose tightening around her neck. She was playing a game, but she didn't know the rules, and the stakes were higher than she ever imagined. Her phone buzzed on the nightstand, cutting through the silence. Maya glanced at the screen. It was a message from Ethan. "You okay?" The question lingered in her mind as she typed back a quick response. "I'm fine, just thinking." She had agreed to work with Ethan, but that decision felt like it was slipping through her fingers. He was her ally, but Maya knew deep down that he wasn't fully invested in the cause. She could feel his hesitation, his lingering loyalty to Todd, but she couldn't afford to worry about that now. She had to stay focused. She had to stay one step ahead. The truth was, Maya didn't know how long she could keep this up. She had become entangled in a web of lies, manipulations, and secrets that were so much bigger than her. She wasn't just fighting Todd anymore. She was fighting an entire system, a corrupt system that would do anything to protect itself. The weight of the situation settled heavily on her shoulders as she stood up and walked to the window. The moon was high in the sky, casting an eerie glow over the quiet street. Maya's thoughts drifted back to her father. He had always taught her to stand firm, to fight for what was right no matter the cost. But would he approve of the path she was walking now? Would he understand why she had chosen to do this? Her phone buzzed again, snapping her out of her thoughts. Another message from Ethan. "I'm meeting with Todd tonight. Be careful. Don't trust him, Maya. He's more dangerous than you think." Maya's heart skipped a beat. She wasn't sure if she should feel relieved or more anxious. Ethan was warning her, but she had already seen the cracks in Todd's armor. She had already felt the weight of his control, the way he manipulated everyone around him. Her fingers hovered over the screen as she composed her response. "I know, but I don't have a choice. We have to stop him. She hit send and set the phone down, her mind racing. She had already come this far. There was no turning back now. Maya knew the next few days would be crucial. She couldn't afford to make any mistakes. Todd was getting too comfortable, too confident, and when people like him got comfortable, they made mistakes. She just had to wait for that moment, that slip-up. But she had to be careful. Todd wasn't the only threat in this situation. Alex was still a mystery, someone she couldn't fully trust. There was something about the way he watched her, the way he seemed to know exactly what she was thinking. Maya couldn't shake the feeling that he was always 2 steps ahead. It was like he was waiting for her to make a mistake, to expose herself. As she sat back on her bed, Maya's mind turned over the details from the meeting at the warehouse. She had learned a lot, but there was so much more to uncover. Todd's plans were larger than she thought. He was setting things in motion that could destroy everything. The town, the people, everything her father had fought for. She closed her eyes, taking a deep breath. She couldn't let him win. No matter the cost, she had to stop him. Maya stood up and paced around the room. Her mind was running a mile a minute, connecting dots, trying to piece together a plan. She couldn't just rely on Ethan or Reynolds or anyone else. This was her fight now. She needed to be the one to bring Todd down. Her phone buzzed again, this time a call. Maya hesitated for a second before answering. It was Reynolds. "Maya, we need to talk," Reynolds said, her voice serious. "Todd's making his next move. We've got to be ready." Maya's heart rate picked up. This was it, the moment she had been waiting for. "What's he planning?" she asked, her voice steady. Reynolds paused. "We're not sure yet, but we've got intel on a meeting he's having tomorrow night. It's big. If we can get in, if we can get the evidence we need, we can expose him for good." Maya's pulse quickened. "I'm in. What do I need to do?" "We'll need you to get close again. We need someone in his inner circle, someone who can listen, who can gather intel without raising suspicion." Maya's stomach dropped. She knew what Reynolds was asking. She would have to get even closer to Todd. "All right," Maya said, her voice firm. "I'll do it. But we need a backup plan in case things go wrong." "We'll be ready," Reynolds assured her. "Just make sure you're careful. We can't afford to make a mistake now." As Maya hung up, she felt the weight of the decision pressed down on her. This was the beginning of the end. Tomorrow night she would take the next step, closer to Todd, closer to the truth. But the more she thought about it, the more she realized that even if they brought Todd down, the damage had already been done. The system was broken, and it would take more than just one man to fix it. Maya stood in front of the mirror, her reflection staring back at her as though she were someone else, someone bolder, someone different. The girl she used to be had faded in the face of everything she had endured. The threats, the lies, and the danger she was constantly walking toward. But now, more than ever, she had to become something more. She had to be strong, strategic, and always 2 steps ahead. If she was going to take Todd down, she couldn't hesitate for even a moment. The plan for tomorrow night was clear: get in, gather intel, and get out. It was simple in theory, but in practice it was anything but. Todd and Alex were both unpredictable. She had learned that firsthand. Todd's bravado and power were only the surface. What really terrified Maya was the cold calculation of Alex, his eyes always studying her, always waiting. She knew he was no ordinary ally to Todd. He was the kind of man who would use anyone, even those closest to him, as pawns in his own game. Her phone buzzed again, pulling her from her thoughts. She glanced at the screen and saw Ethan's name. "Maya, I heard about the meeting. Be careful. Don't trust anyone." She rubbed her eyes, the weight of his words sinking in deeper than she wanted to admit. "I know. Stay close. If anything goes wrong, we need to act fast." She sent the message inside. Even though Ethan had agreed to help her, Maya wasn't sure where his loyalties really lay. Was he truly ready to fight alongside her, or was he just too caught up in his own fear of his uncle? A knot formed in her stomach. She had to trust that Ethan would be there when it mattered most. But she knew she couldn't count on him entirely. This was her fight, one she had to win, even if she was standing alone. The night stretched on, and Maya found herself unable to sleep. She paced her room, replaying every conversation she had had with Todd, every look Alex had given her. There was something about their partnership that didn't sit right with her. Todd might have been the face of the corruption, but Alex was the muscle. He was the one pulling the strings behind the scenes. And Maya wasn't sure how deep his involvement went. But one thing was certain. She couldn't afford to be intimidated. She had already come this far, and there was no going back. The next day she woke up early, the adrenaline already building in her veins. The hours leading up to the meeting were a blur. She spent the morning checking in with Reynolds, making sure everything was in place. The last thing Maya wanted was for anything to go wrong at the last minute. There was too much at stake. Her phone buzzed again, this time a message from Reynolds. The meeting is confirmed. You'll need to stay in the background. No one can know you're working against Todd. Maya exhaled, steadying herself. She was ready. She had to be. She knew this wasn't just about getting the evidence they needed. It was about taking control of her own destiny, about stopping Todd from destroying everything she held dear. By the time evening rolled around, the air was thick with tension. Maya dressed in her best attempt at blending in, a dark jacket and jeans, the kind of outfit that wouldn't stand out in the crowd. She had practiced her fake smile, perfected the art of blending into the background. If she was going to play her role, she had to disappear. She had to be a ghost. When she arrived at the meeting spot, the familiar unease crept back into her chest. The warehouse was as dark as she remembered, but this time she wasn't just an outsider watching from a distance. This time, she was stepping into the lion's den, and there was no guarantee she would make it out. Maya parked in the lot and walked toward the entrance, her steps deliberate but measured. She could hear voices inside, the low hum of murmurs and quiet conversation. She held her breath and stepped inside. The room was large, filled with shadows and men she didn't recognize. A few were standing near the back, chatting among themselves, while Todd and Alex were at the center, surrounded by their usual entourage. Maya's pulse quickened, but she remained calm, her face carefully neutral. She had to act natural, act like she belonged here. She couldn't let them see how much she was trembling on the inside. Todd's eyes locked onto hers as she entered the room. His smile spread across his face, smug and self-assured. "Maya," he said, his voice carrying through the space. "Glad you could join us. I trust everything's been going well?" Maya nodded, forcing a smile. "Of course. I've been keeping up with everything." She allowed herself to look at the others briefly, noting the way they regarded her, some with interest, others with suspicion. Todd's followers were an unpredictable group. She had to make sure they didn't see her as a threat, even though she was. Alex stepped forward, his gaze sharp as he studied her. He didn't say anything, but his presence alone was enough to make Maya's skin prickle. "Good," Todd said. "Tonight's important. We've got some final details to iron out. Maya, you'll want to hear this." She followed Todd to a nearby table where blueprints and papers were spread out. The plans for whatever operation they were orchestrating were all there, detailed, complex, and far-reaching. But it was what she couldn't see that was the most dangerous. Todd wasn't just planning to take control of the town. He was planning something bigger, and she had to find out what. Maya leaned in, pretending to study the plans, her mind racing. As Todd continued to speak, explaining their next moves, Maya's eyes flicked to Alex, who was watching her closely. His expression was unreadable, but there was something about the way he stood there that made her feel like she was under a microscope. Stay calm, stay focused. As the meeting continued, Maya's mind raced with the realization that everything she had suspected was true. Todd wasn't just manipulating the police force, he was weaving a much larger web, and she was caught in it, whether she liked it or not. The drive home felt longer than usual, the streets unfamiliar, as though they were trying to push her away. Maya's mind raced, sorting through the events of the meeting at the warehouse. Todd's plans, the people he was working with, and Alex's cold, calculating eyes. Everything felt like a puzzle she was desperately trying to piece together. But the more she thought about it, the more she realized that the pieces weren't just scattered. They were shifting, moving out of her reach. It wasn't just about taking Todd down anymore. The stakes had grown exponentially. Todd wasn't a rogue cop. He was a man with a vision that was expanding, reaching into areas she hadn't even considered. The town was just the beginning. She had been right about him all along. But the deeper she dug, the more she realized she wasn't just fighting Todd. She was fighting an entire system built on power, manipulation, and control. As Maya pulled into her driveway, she was momentarily distracted by the sight of a police cruiser parked across the street. Her stomach churned. Was Todd sending a message, or was it just a coincidence? She couldn't afford to be paranoid, but she knew better than to dismiss these small signs. Every detail mattered now. She stepped out of the car, her mind on high alert. The cool night air did little to calm the unease growing in her chest. She made her way toward the front door, her eyes darting toward the cruiser once more. But there was no sign of movement. Whoever had been sitting there was gone. She shook off the feeling, but it lingered, like a shadow at the back of her mind. Inside, the house was quiet, the kind of quiet that made her feel like she was the only one left in the world. Her mother was at work, and her father was still overseas on another mission, as far as she knew. Maya could only imagine what her dad would think of everything she was doing. Would he be proud of her courage? Or would he be angry that she had gotten this far into a war that wasn't hers to fight? She pulled off her jacket and sat down at the kitchen table, her hands trembling slightly. She didn't want to be afraid, but the truth was, she was terrified. She had crossed a line tonight, one that could never be uncrossed. The deeper she got into Todd's world, the harder it would be to get out. But she couldn't turn back now. Her phone buzzed, breaking her out of her thoughts. It was a message from Reynolds. "We have a lead. We think we know what Todd is planning next. Meet us at the usual spot in an hour. Be careful, Maya. We're getting closer, but so is he." Maya's heart skipped a beat. An hour. She barely had time to process the message before she found herself standing up, her mind already racing with the possibilities. What had Todd been hiding? What was his next move? She had always known that this wasn't going to be easy. That was part of the reason she had stayed silent for so long. But now everything had changed. The consequences of her actions were catching up to her, and there was no more room for mistakes. If she was going to stop Todd, she had to stay ahead of him. She had to be smarter, faster. Grabbing her jacket, Maya made her way to the door. But just as her hand touched the knob, she froze. Something wasn't right. Her senses were on edge, and the silence in the house felt wrong. She listened closely, her breath caught in her throat. There it was, a faint sound, the softest shuffle of footsteps coming from the hallway. Her pulse quickened as she turned toward the sound. The air in the room seemed to thicken, suffocating her with a sudden, overwhelming fear. Was someone inside the house? The footsteps were getting closer, and Maya instinctively reached for the door handle. But before she could make her move, the door creaked open slowly. "Maya!" She froze. It was Ethan. Her breath rushed out of her as she tried to steady herself, forcing a calm expression. "Ethan," she said, surprised by how steady her voice sounded. "What are you doing here?" He stepped into the room, his face serious, his eyes scanning her as if looking for something. "I needed to see you. We need to talk." Maya's heart raced. She had told herself that she couldn't trust him entirely, but part of her had always hoped that, somehow, they could be on the same side. "About what?" she asked, though she already had an inkling. Ethan didn't answer right away. Instead, he stepped closer, his voice low, almost hesitant. "I think Todd knows you're playing him." Maya's stomach twisted. Her mind flashed back to the looks Todd had given her, the way Alex had studied her every move. "What do you mean?" Ethan ran a hand through his hair, frustration evident in his posture. "I'm not sure how, but I'm starting to think Todd's been keeping track of everything. You're too close to the center now. He's got eyes everywhere, Maya." Her breath caught. The pieces were falling into place, but they didn't fit the way she wanted them to. If Todd knew she was playing him, then she was running out of time. "I can't stop now," she said, her voice barely above a whisper. "I have to finish this." Ethan's eyes softened, but there was a shadow of doubt in his gaze. "You're not alone in this, but you need to be careful. You don't know who you can trust, not even me." Maya turned away, her hand tightening around the edge of the table. She didn't know who to trust anymore. She barely trusted herself. But if she had any chance of stopping Todd, she had to move fast. She had to be smarter than him. And the clock was ticking. Maya's mind was spinning as she absorbed Ethan's warning. If Todd knew she was playing him, Things were about to get far more dangerous. There was no room for mistakes anymore. She couldn't afford to be careless. And yet, in the pit of her stomach, she could feel the weight of her next steps. The moment she decided to confront Todd, to take him down, she had crossed a line that couldn't be undone. But backing down wasn't an option now. Too many people were depending on her. Ethan stood across from her, his expression conflicted, almost as if he was trying to decide whether to stay or leave. There was something about him that made Maya feel torn. She had once trusted him, but now she wasn't sure who he really was. Could she trust him to the extent she needed? Or was he still too tethered to his uncle's influence? Maya, Ethan started, but she cut him off, her voice steely, determined. I know what you're going to say, she said, her tone firm, and I can't afford to let you worry about me anymore. I need you to trust me, just like I'm trusting you. Ethan looked at her, his brow furrowed. You don't have to do this alone. I can help you, but you have to let me. Let me in. The words stung. Maya had spent so much time pushing him away, not just for her own protection, but for his. But now with everything unraveling around them, she wasn't sure who needed help more. Their world had been upended, and now it was all about survival. I can't afford to drag you any further into this, Maya said quietly, her hands clasping tightly together. This has become something far bigger than either of us. If Todd gets what he wants, this town, everyone in it, will be lost. She turned her eyes away from Ethan, unwilling to let him see the vulnerability behind them. Ethan stepped forward, closing the distance between them. Then let's make sure he doesn't get what he wants. Maya's heart raced at his words, but she held her ground, despite the growing sense of urgency in the pit of her stomach. She couldn't let her emotions cloud her judgment. If Todd was watching her, if he knew her every move, then every second counted. She had to act. Fast. You said Todd knows, Maya said, her voice tense. How do you know that? She had always suspected Todd had more resources than he let on. But this confirmation, this realization that Todd was keeping an eye on her, on them, hit her like a punch to the gut. Ethan paused before speaking, his voice low. I overheard something. Last night. I wasn't supposed to hear it, but Todd knows we're closer than he expected. I think he's on to you. Maya clenched her fists at her sides. The truth felt like a weight pressing down on her chest. Every plan she had carefully laid out, every step she had taken, was now under threat. This was no longer just about playing Todd's game. It was about survival. For herself, for her family, and for everyone else caught in Todd's web. What happens now? Maya asked, more to herself than to Ethan. The silence in the room stretched between them, thick with the unspoken consequences of what they were facing. I don't know, Ethan said, his voice quieter now. But I know one thing. We can't go back. You've got something on Todd now, and he's not going to let that slide. Maya nodded grimly. That's why we need to move quickly. If I don't do this now, we lose. Everything. She turned toward the door, her eyes scanning the quiet street outside. She could almost feel Todd's presence looming somewhere in the shadows, watching, waiting. It was like he had his fingers wrapped around everything she held dear, and now Maya had to figure out how to break free. Maya, please, Ethan's voice called from behind her, but she didn't turn around. I'll handle it, Ethan. Just stay out of my way. She didn't mean to sound harsh, but she had already made her decision. This was something she had to do, and she couldn't afford to have anyone hold her back. Stepping outside, Maya pulled her jacket tighter around her body. The cold air hit her like a slap in the face, and for the first time, she welcomed it. It was a reminder that there was still some sense of normalcy in the chaos she was walking through. The world still existed outside of the fight, outside of the battle she had now found herself in. As she made her way toward her car, Maya felt her phone buzz in her pocket. She pulled it out, her eyes scanning the screen. It was a message from Reynolds. Maya, get here. We've got eyes on Todd. It's happening tonight. Maya didn't hesitate. There was no more time to waste. She didn't respond to the message. There was no need for words anymore. She knew what was at stake. It was do or die. The drive to the meeting point was a blur. Maya's thoughts were a storm of strategies, contingencies, and worst-case scenarios. She had been planning for weeks, but tonight, it felt like everything was coming to a head. If this plan worked, they could take Todd down. But if it didn't, Maya didn't want to think about that. By the time she reached the location, her heart was pounding. Reynolds was already waiting, her face tense. Maya barely had time to get out of the car before Reynolds spoke. "We don't have much time. Todd's making his move tonight. We need to be ready." Maya took a deep breath, her fingers shaking as she adjusted her jacket. She nodded to Reynolds, her eyes sharp. "Let's finish this." The tension in the air was suffocating. Maya stood at the edge of the dimly lit alley, her breath steady despite the rapid beating of her heart. She could hear the distant hum of traffic, the occasional sound of footsteps on the pavement. But in the stillness of the night, it felt as if everything was holding its breath. This was it. The moment she had been preparing for had arrived. The plan had seemed simple at first. A few hours ago, it was still a theoretical strategy. Make contact with the right people, gather the evidence, and bring Todd down for good. But now, as Maya stood just a few feet from the entrance of the abandoned building where the meeting would take place, the weight of her decision felt heavier than ever. She wasn't just walking into a meeting. She was stepping into the heart of the storm. The shadows of the building seemed to stretch toward her, as if trying to pull her in. She adjusted the strap of her bag, where a small recorder was hidden, containing all the information they had managed to gather on Todd's operation. If things went according to plan, tonight would be the end of it all. If it didn't, Maya didn't want to think about the consequences. Reynolds had already briefed her on the layout of the building, the escape routes, and the best angles for listening in on Todd's meeting. Maya had heard the rumors about Todd's power and influence. She knew what he was capable of, but she hadn't truly understood the depth of his control until now. Every move he made had been calculated to protect himself, to make sure that no one, especially someone like her, could stop him. Maya glanced at her watch. Time was running out. She took a deep breath and stepped forward. Each step she took echoed in the silence, but she couldn't afford to hesitate. Not now. As she approached the door, she could hear voices inside, the low murmur of conversation, punctuated by an occasional laugh or a sharp word. Maya's pulse quickened. She had to be smart. She couldn't afford to make a single mistake tonight. Pushing the door open just a crack, she slipped inside, her senses on high alert. The room was bathed in a soft, yellowish light, casting long shadows across the floor. In the center of the room, Todd stood, his arms folded, speaking to a group of men she didn't recognize. They were dressed in dark suits, their faces cold and impassive as they listened to Todd. Maya's eyes darted to the side where she spotted Reynolds standing near the far wall, her posture tense but ready. They exchanged a brief look before Maya slipped further into the room, trying to stay out of the men's line of sight. She positioned herself next to a stack of crates, keeping to the shadows as Todd continued to speak. "This is our moment," Todd was saying, his voice low but commanding. "We've got everything in place. The town, the police force, everything is under our control. No one can touch us now." Maya's stomach turned at the words. It was worse than she had feared. Todd wasn't just trying to take control of the town. He was orchestrating a network of power and influence that stretched far beyond anything she had imagined. "You're sure about the evidence?" one of the men asked, his voice sharp. Todd nodded, a smug smile spreading across his face. "It's foolproof. Once the mayor signs off on this, we'll have the city locked down. No one will stand in our way." Maya's fingers tightened around the recorder in her pocket. This was it, the moment she'd been waiting for. They had all the pieces. Now they just needed to make sure it didn't slip through their fingers. But as the conversation continued, Maya began to feel something she hadn't expected. Doubt. Something wasn't right. The men in the room, how many of them were truly with Todd? How many were just following orders, like Ethan had? She could feel it in the air, the tension, the suspicion. Todd was too confident, too sure of his position. He thought no one could touch him, but Maya knew better. Everyone had a weakness, and if she could find his, it would all fall apart. Her thoughts were interrupted by a soft click. Footsteps approaching the room's entrance. Maya tensed, instinctively ducking behind a crate. She held her breath as the door creaked open, a silhouette emerging from the shadows. It was Alex. His cold eyes scanned the room, his posture rigid, as though he was always on alert. Maya's heart skipped a beat. She had known he was involved with Todd, but she hadn't realized just how much until now. Alex's gaze lingered in her direction for a moment, and she felt a chill run down her spine. Had he seen her? Was he suspicious? Maya forced herself to remain perfectly still, her breath barely a whisper. She couldn't afford to get caught. Not now. Not when they were this close. Everything's going according to plan, Alex said, his voice low and controlled. Todd turned to him with a slight smirk. I know, I'm just waiting for the final piece to fall into place. Maya clenched her fists, her mind working overtime. Todd's confidence was his greatest weakness. He thought he had everything under control, but the more he talked, the more obvious it became that there were cracks in his armor. If she could just get close enough, if she could find the evidence they needed to expose him, this would be over. But the question remained, could she do it before Todd realized she was already a step ahead? Maya's heart hammered in her chest as she stayed crouched behind the crates, every muscle in her body taut with tension. The weight of the recorder in her pocket seemed to grow heavier with every passing second. She couldn't afford to miss this opportunity. Everything they had worked for, every bit of sacrifice, every dangerous move, came down to tonight. If Todd caught wind of her presence or realized what she was after, it would all fall apart. She strained to listen, her eyes flicking between Todd, Alex, and the other men in the room. The conversation was beginning to shift. The stakes were getting clearer. We need to move quickly on this, one of the men said, his voice filled with urgency. The mayor's getting cold feet. We can't afford to wait any longer. If he doesn't sign, we'll have to take matters into our own hands. Todd's eyes narrowed, his earlier arrogance replaced with a flicker of concern. I've already told him that we don't negotiate, Todd replied, his voice low but tinged with anger. He signs or we move on without him. But I don't want to rush things. I want to control the narrative. We do this my way. Maya's mind raced as she took in every word. The mayor was involved, and if he didn't play along, they were prepared to take drastic action. Maya knew that a corrupt official like Todd would stop at nothing to get what he wanted. She had seen it before. When the system was bent to the will of people like Todd, no one was safe. Alex, who had been silent for a few moments, stepped forward. His eyes scanned the room before they landed on Todd. Are we sure this is the right move? Alex asked, his voice calm but with an underlying edge of suspicion. You've got the evidence. You've got the power. But rushing this could make things messy. We don't want any loose ends. Todd shot Alex a cold look, one that seemed to send a shiver through the room. There are no loose ends, Todd said with finality. Everything is in place. We've already covered our tracks. But if you're that concerned, then fine. We'll give it one more day. But after that, no more waiting. Maya's eyes widened. One more day. They were moving fast and she didn't have much time. If she was going to expose Todd and his network, she needed to act quickly, or the window of opportunity would close. The conversation continued, but Maya's mind was no longer fully listening. She was thinking about her next move. She needed to get closer to Todd and Alex without being detected. She needed to get something, anything that could be used against them. The recorder in her pocket was a start, but it wouldn't be enough. She had to go further. She had to get inside their operation. Her gaze flicked over to Reynolds, who was still stationed by the back wall, watching the meeting intently. The tension in the room had thickened, and Maya knew that if she didn't make a move soon, she might lose her chance. Her eyes met Reynolds for a split second, and Maya saw the silent agreement between them. It was now or never. Maya took a deep breath, mentally preparing herself. She had to stay calm. She had to be precise. Stepping carefully, she moved to the edge of the room, staying low, keeping to the shadows. She couldn't afford to get caught, but every step felt like it was taking her closer to the heart of the storm. She had to be quick. No more hesitations. But as she neared the small desk at the center of the room, where Todd and Alex had laid out the plans, she saw something that made her blood run cold. A folder, thick with documents, lay on the desk. Maya could see the top of it, the words "confidential" stamped across the front. She knew that this could be the breakthrough they needed, but it was too risky to grab it right now. She'd have to wait for the perfect moment. Maya's thoughts raced, her eyes flicking between the men who were still engaged in their conversation. Todd and Alex had now shifted to discussing the specifics of their next move. how they would implement their control over Jefferson's political system. Their words were laced with arrogance and entitlement, a reminder of just how deep their corruption ran. Maya felt a wave of disgust wash over her as she watched them, but she knew she couldn't let her emotions interfere with the task at hand. There was no turning back now. She was in the lion's den. It was then that Maya's phone buzzed in her pocket. She froze, every muscle in her body tightening. The vibration seemed too loud in the silence of the room, and she prayed that no one had heard it. She held her breath, staring at the screen. It was a message from Ethan. "Where are you? What's happening?" Maya quickly silenced the phone, her heart racing. She could almost feel Todd's gaze in her direction, like a predator sensing prey. She needed to focus. There was no time to respond to Ethan right now. The urgency of the situation had escalated to a point where one small slip could ruin everything. Her fingers shook as she tucked the phone back into her pocket. It was time to act. Stepping out of the shadows, Maya approached the desk, moving swiftly but with purpose. Her hand hovered over the folder, her heart pounding in her chest. She could hear Todd's voice getting louder as he finished his conversation with the others, but her focus remained fixed on the folder in front of her. This was it. She grabbed it. Before she could retreat back into the shadows, Todd's voice cut through the air, sharp and commanding. "Maya!" Her heart skipped a beat. She turned slowly, her face betraying nothing. Todd was looking directly at her, his eyes narrowing. A tense silence settled between them as the other men turned toward her as well. Maya's mind was racing. The plan had just changed. Maya's heart skipped a beat as Todd's eyes locked onto hers. The weight of the moment seemed to press down on her chest, and for a second, everything around her froze. The conversation stopped, and the room fell into an uneasy silence. The men who had been discussing their plans with Todd were now looking at her with suspicion, their eyes scanning her every movement. Todd's expression remained unreadable, but his gaze was sharp, calculated. "Maya," he repeated, his voice smooth but cold. "I didn't expect to see you here." Maya's mind raced. Her body screamed at her to run, to make a quick exit, but she forced herself to stand her ground. This wasn't the time to falter. This wasn't the time to back down. She took a slow breath, steadying herself before speaking. "I'm here because you're making a mistake, Todd. A mistake that's going to cost you everything." The words hung in the air between them, but Maya's mind was already several steps ahead. The folder she had snatched from the desk felt like a ticking time bomb in her hands. She couldn't let Todd see her fear. She couldn't let him control the situation anymore. Todd's lips curled into a faint smile, though it didn't reach his eyes. "A mistake?" he asked, his tone mocking. "You really think you can stop this, Maya? You've already played your part, but you're out of your league." Maya's stomach twisted with anger. She had heard that before, and every time it fueled her determination to prove him wrong. "I'm not out of my league," she said, her voice low but firm. "And you're not as untouchable as you think." There was a flash of something, maybe surprise, maybe annoyance, in Todd's eyes, but he quickly masked it with a smirk. "You've always had more guts than brains," he said. "I'll give you that, but you're playing with fire, and soon enough you'll get burned." Maya could feel the tension building in the room. The other men were watching closely, their eyes shifting between her and Todd, as if waiting for one of them to make a move. The air was thick with anticipation, but Maya refused to let it intimidate her. She was ready for this. She had no choice but to be. "Take a look at this," Maya said, pulling the folder from her bag. "This is what's going to take you down." She stepped forward, her eyes locked on Todd, refusing to break his gaze. Todd's eyes flicked to the folder, but his expression remained unfazed. "Is that supposed to intimidate me?" he asked, a scoff escaping his lips. Maya didn't flinch. "You've been orchestrating everything, your deals, your plans, the corruption, but it's all in here, everything, and now it's about to come out. You can't hide from this anymore." A few seconds passed before Todd's smirk faded. His face tightened, and for the first time Maya saw a flicker of something she hadn't expected. Fear. It was brief, fleeting, but it was there. "You think you can just expose me like this?" Todd's voice grew low, dangerous. "Do you know what that would cost you?" Maya stood tall, the folder in her hand feeling heavier than ever. But she wasn't backing down. She wouldn't let him intimidate her. It's too late for threats, Todd. Your time is up. Todd's gaze shifted, and for a moment it looked as if he was going to lash out. But then he stopped. He looked at her with a calculating expression, as though weighing his options. You're a fool, Maya, Todd said finally, his tone sharp. But maybe you're the kind of fool I need. If you think you've won, you're sorely mistaken. You have no idea what you're really up against. Before Maya could respond, one of the men, someone she hadn't seen before, moved toward her. His face was hidden in the shadows, but his presence was unmistakable. Maya Carter, the man said, his voice thick with authority. I think you've overstayed your welcome. Maya's stomach dropped. She hadn't expected this. A new player in the game, someone she hadn't accounted for. The man's demeanor was calm, but there was an unmistakable menace in his voice. Todd glanced at the man, then back at Maya, his lips curling into a smile that was anything but reassuring. I think you're right, Todd said, his voice laced with a cold amusement. Maya, you've made your choice. Now let's see if you can live with it. In that moment, Maya realized that the situation had escalated far beyond her expectations. She had thought she was one step ahead, but now she wasn't so sure. She could feel the walls closing in, the weight of Todd's control bearing down on her like a vice. But there was no turning back now. The game had changed, and this time Maya was playing for keeps. Maya's eyes darted from Todd to the man who had stepped forward. The new figure in the room, this mysterious person who had appeared out of nowhere, wasn't someone she could ignore. There was something about him, something chilling, that made her instincts flare. He wasn't just part of Todd's entourage. He was something far more dangerous. The man was tall, wearing a black coat that seemed to blend into the shadows. His eyes were dark, calculating, and he wasn't looking at her like a threat. He was studying her, measuring her, as if she were a puzzle he was trying to solve. Maya's heart began to race again, and her mind scrambled for an exit strategy. She had to think fast. This wasn't just about collecting evidence anymore. It was about surviving. Todd leaned back slightly, his smirk returning as if he enjoyed the way the tension was thickening. Maya, he said softly, I've always respected your resilience. But this is foolish. The man in black stepped closer, his movements smooth and deliberate. Maya stood her ground, her breathing steady, though she could feel a lump forming in her throat. This wasn't how she had planned for things to go down. She had expected resistance, of course. But this felt different. The room felt suffocating, the walls closing in as she realized how much deeper the conspiracy ran. You've made a dangerous enemy, Maya, the man said, his voice low and unshaken. Do you even know what you're up against? Maya swallowed hard, her eyes narrowing in determination. I know exactly what I'm up against. It's you and Todd, and everything you've built on lies and corruption. The man's lips curled into a smile that didn't reach his eyes. Lies and corruption are just words, girl. What we've built is power. Power that's more permanent than anything you've ever known. Maya could feel the weight of his words settle in her chest, but she refused to let them shake her. Power. That was the thing that Todd and his network had traded in. Real, raw power. But that power had a price, and tonight she was here to make sure the price came due. I'm not here to listen to your empty threats, Maya replied, her voice steady despite the unease creeping into her bones. I'm here to bring you down. The man's expression shifted, the humor fading as his eyes darkened. Todd, who had been watching the exchange with a strange amusement, finally spoke again. You still don't get it, do you, Maya? His voice was cold now, a finality in his tone. You think you're some hero, some martyr, but you're just a pawn in a game much bigger than you. He took a slow step forward, his eyes locking with hers. This is not a fight you can win, not anymore. Maya's pulse quickened as Todd moved closer. There was an edge to his voice now, a dangerous undertone that sent a warning signal through her. She tightened her grip on the folder, her last tangible piece of leverage in this twisted game. Maybe you're right, Maya said, her voice low and controlled. But maybe you're wrong. She took a deep breath and stepped back, her eyes flicking toward Reynolds, who was still positioned by the wall. Their eyes met for just a fraction of a second, an unspoken communication. It was time. Without warning, Maya spun on her heel, bolting toward the back of the room. She wasn't sure where she was going. She just knew that she couldn't stay in the center of the room with Todd and his men closing in on her. The floor beneath her feet seemed to hum with the intensity of the moment, and her heart pounded as she pushed forward, praying she was fast enough. "Stop her!" Todd shouted behind her, his voice sharp with fury. But it was too late. As Maya reached the door at the far end of the room, Reynolds acted, taking the initiative that Maya had been counting on. In an instant, the lights in the room flickered out, plunging everything into darkness. A moment of confusion. The room went silent, except for the frantic scuffling of feet as Todd's men began to scramble. Maya didn't wait for the light to come back on. She was already in motion, ducking through the door and sprinting into the hallway. She could hear the distant sounds of pursuit, the pounding of footsteps. Todd and his men weren't far behind, but she was quicker. She had to be. Her breath came in ragged gasps as she rounded a corner, the hallway stretching endlessly ahead. She had no plan for where she was going, only a sense of urgency driving her forward. She needed to buy time, give Reynolds and the others a chance to gather everything they needed. "Maya, over here!" Reynolds' voice rang out from a side door. Maya didn't hesitate. She sprinted toward the sound, pushing herself harder, faster. She barely managed to make it inside the small, hidden room before the lights came back on in the hallway. The door slammed shut behind her, and Maya leaned against it, her heart racing. Reynolds was already there, her face tense but determined. "We've got what we need," she said quickly, her voice low. "But we need to move fast. Todd knows something's wrong." Maya nodded, still catching her breath. The plan was in motion now. They had the evidence. The only thing left was getting out of here alive. But as the door to the room behind her rattled, a sense of dread washed over her. This wasn't over yet, not by a long shot. The walls of the small room were closing in, but Maya didn't feel suffocated. Not anymore. There was only one way out now, and it was a path she had already decided to take. With every passing second, she could hear the faint sounds of Todd's men outside, their footsteps echoing in the dim hallway, their voices low but tinged with panic. They were starting to realize the gravity of the situation. They hadn't expected her to fight back this hard, and now they were scrambling, trying to regain control. Reynolds was already at the far side of the room, her eyes scanning the monitors that displayed various feeds from the building. Maya couldn't help but feel a sense of gratitude toward the woman. Reynolds had always been the steady one, the one who knew how to keep calm when everything was falling apart. But tonight, everything felt different. The stakes had never been higher. "We've got the evidence we need," Reynolds said, her voice calm but urgent. "But we're running out of time. Todd knows we've made a move." Maya nodded, taking a deep breath as she turned her attention to the folder still clutched tightly in her hands. It was everything. Every scrap of proof they had gathered over the last few weeks. The corrupt deals, the bribes, the illegal activities. The documentation that would bring Todd down once and for all. If she could just get this into the right hands, it would be over. But the clock was ticking, and the window of opportunity was rapidly closing. The room seemed to pulse with tension. Maya's mind raced as she thought through the next steps. The most dangerous part was yet to come. They had to get out of the building, and they had to do it without being caught. Todd's men were closing in on them, and they couldn't afford to make a single mistake. "Do you think they're already on to us?" Maya asked, her voice barely above a whisper. She didn't want to voice the fear that had been growing inside her, but it was hard to ignore the way her heart was hammering in her chest. Reynolds didn't look up from the monitors, but her response was clear. "Yes, they're aware. We need to get this out of here and into the hands of the right people. Fast." Maya's eyes flickered to the door. She could hear the faint sounds of footsteps now, the unmistakable sound of someone trying to move silently through the building. It was only a matter of time before they realized the room was empty. Maya couldn't shake the feeling that someone, maybe even Todd himself, was already on their way to find them. A shiver ran down her spine as the realization hit her. Todd had always been one step ahead of her, and now she was beginning to feel that familiar sense of unease. But she couldn't afford to back down. This was it. There was no turning back. The moment they walked out of this room, the battle would be won or lost. "Maya," Reynolds said, breaking her thoughts, "we have to move now." Maya nodded, stuffing the folder into her bag. She could feel the weight of it pressing against her, but she wasn't worried about the physical burden. She was worried about what would happen if they failed. What would happen if Todd got his hands on the evidence and erased it all? The only chance they had was to take control of the situation now. No more hesitation, no more second guessing. Maya reached for the door, her hand trembling slightly as she placed it on the handle. The cool metal felt like a lifeline, grounding her in the moment. She wasn't sure what was waiting on the other side, but she knew she had to be ready for whatever came next. The door opened quietly and Maya slipped out first, followed closely by Reynolds. They moved swiftly through the darkened hallways, the sound of their footsteps muffled by the thick silence that surrounded them. There were no guards in sight, at least not yet. The plan had always been to slip out undetected, but with every step they took, Maya felt the tension build. "This way," Reynolds whispered, gesturing to the left. They passed a few doorways, but Maya didn't dare to look inside. She couldn't afford to get distracted. Every minute was crucial. As they neared the exit, Maya's heart began to race again. She could see the faint glow of the streetlights through the windows just beyond the doors. The night air was waiting for them, but there was something else out there too, something darker. She could feel Todd's presence, even without seeing him. He was out there lurking, watching. Suddenly, the sound of footsteps echoed down the hallway. Maya froze. Reynolds stopped beside her, her hand already reaching for the gun at her side. But Maya wasn't sure if they had the element of surprise anymore. "I think they figured it out," Maya said, her voice low. "We don't have much time." Reynolds nodded grimly. "We have to make it out now. Ready?" Maya took a deep breath, nodding. "Let's go." The door to the building loomed ahead, just a few feet away, but Maya felt like it might as well be miles. Every step felt heavier than the last, and the weight of what they were about to do pressed down on her shoulders. Her breath came faster as she and Reynolds moved with precision, silent but swift, like shadows in the night. But she could hear the footsteps getting closer, the sound of people closing in, and the tension in her body started to rise. "Almost there," Reynolds whispered, her voice calm but urgent. Maya's pulse quickened as they approached the exit. They could see the flickering light from the street lamp outside, and the promise of freedom felt just within reach. But with every step, the danger escalated. The silence was shattered by the distant sounds of voices, shouting now, calling out orders. Todd's men were searching. They were getting closer, and Maya knew it was only a matter of time before they would spot them. "Stay close," Reynolds warned. "We can't afford to be seen." Maya nodded, doing her best to stay focused. Her hand tightened around the strap of her bag, feeling the evidence within it. The folder. The proof. It was their only leverage now. It had to be delivered, and it had to be done right. But as they reached the final door, Maya heard something she hadn't expected. An unmistakable sound. The click of a gun being cocked. Her body went cold, the hair on the back of her neck standing up. They were trapped. Without thinking, Maya spun around, instinctively reaching for Reynolds' arm and pulling her back behind the nearest wall. They flattened themselves against it, pressing as close as they could to the cool, hard surface. The footsteps grew louder, and Maya's heart pounded in her ears. She tried to steady her breathing, trying not to make a sound. Through the small gap between the walls, she saw two figures emerge from the shadows, weapons in hand, Todd's men. The barrel of the gun gleamed in the dim light as they passed by, their voices low and controlled, too close for comfort. "They're on to us," Reynolds muttered under her breath, her eyes fixed on the men, her fingers flexing around the grip of her weapon. "They're not far behind. If we don't move now—" But before Reynolds could finish, Maya's gaze shifted to the hallway ahead. Another figure stepped into view. Todd. Her heart stopped. There he was, standing just a few yards away, his eyes scanning the room with a focused intensity. He hadn't seen them yet, but it was only a matter of time. Maya's mind raced, the pieces of the plan falling into place. There was no room for error now. She had to act, and she had to act fast. "Reynolds," Maya whispered urgently, "I've got an idea." Reynolds turned to her, eyes sharp. Maya could see the hesitation in her partner's face, but there was no time for second-guessing. "I'm going to create a diversion," Maya said quickly. "You take the evidence and get to the exit. Don't wait for me. Go. I'll be right behind you." Reynolds opened her mouth to argue, but Maya cut her off with a hard look. "Number," We don't have time for this. Go, I'll be fine. Reynolds hesitated for a moment longer, then nodded. Be careful. I'll be waiting for you. Maya didn't wait for Reynolds to leave. She took a deep breath, steeling herself for what was to come. She had no choice. She was already too deep in this fight. There was no turning back now. As Todd and his men moved closer, Maya stepped out from behind the wall, her steps slow, deliberate. Her fingers reached for her phone, pressing a button to trigger the panic alarm they'd set up earlier. A loud, shrill sound pierced the quiet of the building, causing Todd and his men to pause. Todd's head snapped toward the noise, his eyes narrowing. Maya didn't give him the chance to react. She sprinted toward the other side of the hallway, drawing their attention away from the exit. She had only a few precious seconds to make sure Reynolds could get out. Gunshots rang out behind her, but Maya didn't flinch. She pushed herself harder, running as fast as she could. The sound of footsteps following her sent a surge of adrenaline through her veins. She couldn't let them catch her, not now, not when she was so close. She reached the end of the hallway and ducked into another room, hoping to lose them in the maze of corridors. The adrenaline was coursing through her body now, her heart pounding in her chest. She could hear the men calling out to each other, their footsteps growing louder. But Maya wasn't going to let them catch her. Not after everything she had been through. She reached for her phone, eyes scanning the screen to check the status of Reynolds. The message flashed across the screen, and Maya let out a sigh of relief. Reynolds had made it outside. She was safe. But Maya wasn't out of danger yet. She knew the worst was yet to come.